Mother's Day is coming, and so I have gathered several full-length tutorials here that I think would be fantastic ideas of things to make for mom. I'm purposefully leaving out kitchen stuff just because, it's Mother's Day, or we're gonna make her something that's either going to pamper her or just make her feel good and loved. Check the description below for all the different tutorials that are included in this big old Mother's Day mashup. And it will show you the timestamp if you want to skip ahead to something in particular instead of watching the whole thing. There will also be links if there are patterns that you can buy in my Etsy shop or free templates or tutorials that you can get if you're on my email list. But it is also important to know that all of my Sew with Tara Reid members get access to all of that for free. So I would like to invite you to click the link below this video that says, try the membership for $1. I really think you'll like it. Now, let's get started on some ideas for mom. If you or someone you love finds their happy place in the garden, you're gonna love this tutorial today for a 5-pocket garden apron. 2 big pockets, 3 smaller ones to hold all your gardening stuff. And it is so easy to make. I'm also going to show you how to make these ties. You always see them on Pinterest and social media where it's super cute and it's tied around in the front, usually on a petite model. So I'm gonna show you how to measure and figure out what size you need to make you look cute no matter what your waist size. Because I'm gonna admit, the basic size doesn't fit my waist. So you are not alone if it doesn't fit yours. Ready to get started? Let's look at what we need. So first, you're obviously going to need some fabrics. And here are what you need. I'm going to be using these chickens for both the front and the back of the fabric. So I've cut 2 pieces, 20 inches by 13 inches. Then for the first pocket, the taller pocket, I'm going to use these cute little windmills. And this is all from my Spring Barn Quilts fabric collection from Riley Blake Designs. So it feels a little weird that the pocket is actually bigger than the apron, but we're going to be folding it in half. So just trust me on this. I've made more than one. So for the bigger pocket, you're going to cut 20 by 16 inches. Then the smaller pocket is going to be black, and you're going to cut that 20 by 10 inches. Then you need 2 sashes, which you can do with the fabric, cut off the selvage 4 inches wide and just see how that fits. And you might have to tie it in the back, you might have to tie it in the front, or you can jump ahead and see where I show you how to measure and figure out exactly how long you need it to be for you or someone else if you can measure their waist and make it so that it's going to tie super cute in the front, like all the garden aprons you see on social media. The last piece of fabric is going to be the waistband, and I decided for this one to have my waistband match the bigger pocket. If you look at this other one, I did that a little bit differently. So I did a waistband that matched the color, but not the exact same fabric. So on this one, I used 4 different fabrics, and I also did a scrappy sash where I put together some different fabric scraps that were all 4 inches wide and made it as long as I wanted, versus today, we are going to just use the single or the 2 long pieces of fabric. So that's your fabric. Now, it's really important that a garden apron have some stability to it because it's going to have heavier things in it like trowels and your phone and I don't know, all kinds of things that you don't want just flopping around. So you need some interfacing. You can use any kind of medium weight. What I used was this ES 114 Easy Shaper interfacing from Pellon. I just went and bought 1 packet, which was 20 inches by 1 yard or 36 inches. I got the 3 pieces that I need, and then I have another 20-inch by 9-inch piece to use for something else. So for your interfacing, you're just going to cut a 1/2 inch smaller than the outside and both of the pockets. That's your basic supplies. The first step is to get our interfacing on the back of our 3 pieces. I'm going to put it on the back of the apron front, which in my case, I'm using the same for the front and back, so it doesn't really matter. But if you're going to use different fabric on the front and back, I would recommend putting your interfacing on the front, and then we will do the 2 pockets. So grab your fabric, you're going to turn it upside down on your ironing board, and just make sure whatever kind of interfacing you use that you follow the manufacturer's instructions. So I do have those right here to check on. And then a fusible interfacing always has a little bit of a shiny side and a duller side. The shiny side is the fuse. So it is the stuff that you're going to heat and adhere to your fabric. So you want to put that shiny side down against your fabric, and we cut it so that it will be about a 1/4 inch smaller than our piece of fabric, because we don't need all this added bulk in our seams. And you do not iron right on this. You want to use a pressing cloth, which is basically a thin piece of cotton. And the directions say that it should be damp. Well, I'm not going to take it to my sink. I'm going to use this cute little sprayer. So I'm just going to keep moving my iron. You could also use a heat press. So if you have a big heat press or you have like a Cricut heat press, you could use that. And then you're going to be able to do a bigger area at once. When you think you have that all pressed properly, just lift it up and check the corners. Oh, this one, so it's pretty good, but I didn't quite hit the corners well. So just put your pressing cloth back down and give that a little bit more heat. You want to make sure it's just adhered nicely all the way across your fabric and definitely on those edges. Now let me show you how to do the pockets. And because we're going to be folding this fabric to make the pocket so that the inside is covered, we didn't need a piece of interfacing that covered the entire fabric like with the outside. We just need to cover half. So again, check that the fusible side is down and put it down on one long end and just leave a little bit for the seam allowance. And then we're just going to do the same thing. Put that pressing mat down, get a little dampness where that interfacing is, and press. And I'm going to do this for both of the pockets. So we have the interfacing on one half of each of the pockets. So now we're just going to fold the other half down. We're going to line up all those edges and we're going to press the top edge of the pockets. So there's one. Now we have our 3 fabrics, the apron front, the bigger pocket, and the smaller pocket with the interfacing all lined up. Now we are going to do our lines to make our 5 pockets, and I'm going to show you how we're going to flip and stitch to get that done. So the first one we're going to do is this center pocket. And if you are using a directional fabric like I am, because you'll see some of these are flipped around, but most of them are coming in this direction, you want to make sure that this is the side that will go on the front of your pocket. Because if you did it this way, they're all going to look upside down on your apron, which is not ideal. So this should be 20 inches wide, just about, not quite perfect, but perfect enough. And I'm just going to draw a line at the 10-inch mark with my heat erasable pen. And look at that. That's going to be really easy to see where to sew. And the second I put the iron on it, any heat on it, it is just going to disappear like magic. So that is our first line. Now I'm going to start layering this together. So I'm going to put the apron down. And now I'm going to line this up on the bottom. Now I'm going to put the bottom pocket on and make sure you're putting all the raw edges at the bottom. So these are the 2 pockets. This one's going to have 3 pockets. So we're going to put a line 3 inches to either side of this center line. This is a chalk marker from Clover. Let's put it 3 inches from that center line and then 3 inches to the other side as well. So I'm lining up on that line and also lining up along the top edge of my pocket to make sure this line is going to go nice and straight. We're going to start by sewing one of the 2 lines on the small pocket to the bigger pocket. And it doesn't matter which one you start with. I do usually start on the raw edges. So if you have any issue with your not being great, it's not going to be at the top of a pocket where you might see it. And then I am going to double back when I get to that fold just to reinforce the top of the pocket. So let's just get one of those sewn. Now I'm going to get my apron front and I'm going to line up the raw edges on the bottom and the sides of both pockets and my apron. See that? Now the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to flip this bottom pocket section. I'm going to fold that back so that we can see the line on the larger section, and we're going to sew that to the apron. We can't just flip this back and sew here, or else you're going to have a really weird sewn section in this big pocket. So we're going to do a little bit more flipping. We're just going to lift the pockets, flip the apron fabric. So I've folded that back. So now when I sew this second line, I'm only sewing through both of those pockets. So just make sure everything's lined up, and we're going to do this third stitch line. Now our pockets are sewn on, and I ironed it to get rid of the lines, got rid of the chalk marks. I trimmed a little bit on the edge to make sure everything was evened up. Now we are going to attach the apron front and pockets to the back. So we're going to leave this face up, put the back face down, or right sides together. If you want to have just squared corners, you're just going to pin and sew this together now. But I want to show you how to make the cute little curved corners. I'm going to use just a small Pyrex cup. I think that's like a 1 cup size. You can use a coffee mug, you could use a bowl, but I like the size of this, and I happen to have it in my sewing room. So I'm just going to put this on the 2 bottom corners and draw with my pen. I'm going to clip all these layers together so that they will be less likely to move about as I cut those corners. I'm going to put some marks just at the top so that when I'm sewing, I remember to leave that section open for turning right side out. One thing I love about this project is because we are using a waistband and we're not just using this top edge, we're not going to have to be as detail oriented when we turn and press that top, because that opening is going to be hidden. That's why you want to do it at the top and not on the side or the bottom. And then I'm going to hold my hand here to try and keep it from shifting too much, and then just cut that corner. Now I'm going to do the second one. Now you're going to take it to the sewing machine. You're going to sew all the way around, leaving this open for turning. And I'm going to use a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance just because there are so many layers that if you use a 1/4 inch, it might just be a little bit too small and something might not catch very well. So I found that going a little bit bigger than that is better for this project. You could even do a 1/2 inch if you want to be extra, extra sure. Now that we've sewn all around that, we just need to clip the curves and also the corners. Because there is so much fabric here, I mean, look at that. I'm going to first trim this closer to the curve, so there's just less bulk sitting in there when it's turned. And then I'm going to do a bunch of little cuts. Now, normally I like to use pinking shears for this, but I tried that on the last one, and I'll show you in a second. It doesn't work super well. Just make sure when you're doing this, especially if you use big scissors like this, don't cut your stitch line. Let me show you what happens if you want to try pinking shears. If you try and go more than like 2 or 3 teeth from the back, it bends. So it can be done. You just have to go a lot slower. Next step, we are going to turn it right side out. And then I just stick my hand in here and get these curves smoothed out nicely. So now I'm just going to take it to the ironing board and I'm going to press it, and you'll see it naturally just wants to lay like that, because these 3 pieces with all that interfacing are a lot thicker than this one back piece. So you do want to make sure when you're pressing that you get that folded over, because you just want the bottom of your pocket and not part of the back of your apron showing. Now that I have this nicely pressed, I'm going to edge stitch all the way around the entire apron, about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And I've decided to use black thread on the top and a tan bobbin so it won't show as much on the back of the apron. Now that we have this all sewn together, we just need to do the sashes and the waistband. So I brought out my Skinny Mini mannequin to show you how to measure either whoever your apron is going to be for or for yourself, so that you can make it super cute and have the sashes wrap around and tie in the front, because you might need bigger than the basic with the fabric. I do, so don't feel bad if you do. So we're going to pretend this apron is too big for her. We're going to pretend that it is this wide, okay? And she's going to have, stop tipping. She's going to have it sit right about here on her hips. So what you're going to do is you're going to measure from here all the way around to the center, okay? So I'm going to grab a tape measure, and And I'm going to put it right on the hip where the apron ended on the one side. I'm going to wrap it straight around. And then I'm just going to stop kind of in the center because that is where we're going to want to tie. So I'm going to take that measurement, 27. Oh, she is skinny. 27. And then I'm going to add 10 to 12 inches, depending on how much longer you want your sash to be. For the sashes, you're just going to take these long pieces or the pieces that you piece together, 4 inches by whatever you need. You're going to fold it in half. And then you're just going to sew one short end and all the way down the long end. I never pin this. I just make sure it's lining up as I'm putting it through the sewing machine. But if you're a newer sewer, teaching somebody to sew or just prefer it, you can pin it that whole length. So you're going to do both of those, and then we're going to turn those right side out. Now I want to show you one of my favorite things when you're doing long straps or sashes or whatever, things for bags, basically long tubes that you need to turn right side out. Now, growing up, when my mom was teaching me to sew, we would put a safety pin on the end and then scrunch it. And I'm telling you, it is so hard on your hands to do that. So I want to show you how to use these fabric tubes from Dritz if you haven't used them before. It has a nice plastic tube that's slippery. That's important. And then it has like a dowel rod, or kind of looks like a chopstick. So what we're going to do, and we're going to do this for both of our sashes, I have it sewn together. We're sewed across and down, left one end open. I'm going to clip the corner, just cut that off so that we can get that turned well. And then, it's the fun part. I'm just going to put the tube into the fabric and just push it all the way down. Okay, see, that's pretty long, but you're going to be amazed at how fast we can turn this. All right, next you're going to take the stick and you're going to insert it, just kind of push the fabric in the end gently. Don't do it too hard, because if you really jam it hard, you could pop through your stitches or your fabric, which would be a bummer, but fixable. Anything's fixable on sewing, except messed up cutting. So you're just going to push that in, and then you're just going to pull that fabric down until you can see the tube and the stick. So now all you're going to do is you're just going to pull it like that. Ah, look at how fast that was. Oh my gosh, just pull that off. Now don't take the stick out yet, because what you want to do is you want to take the stick and gently push out those corners, and then you're good to go. Now all you have to do is go to the ironing board and pull that seam out and make it nice and straight and flat. I wish there was a tool that did that as quickly as this turns this thing. But you know what? This saves a ton of time over turning this right side out with a safety pin. So I'm going to take it. Now I'm going to show you how I figure out the perfect width for the waistband. I mean, if everything went perfectly, you would turn a 1/4 inch on each end, and it would be the same width as your apron. But as we saw in the beginning, my apron was slightly off. So I just like to do it this way. I line my apron up with my waistband, and then I just fold it so that it matches, and I press each end. This way, you're going to have your waistband be the exact width that you want it the first time without having to adjust it later if your apron is slightly larger or skinnier than you thought it was going to be in the beginning. So see? Perfection. So now I can put that aside. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do each of these long edges. I'm going to press them under a 1/4 inch. Then the final step before we sew this on is to fold it in half. Moving right along, it is time to connect the sashes to the apron and then put on the waistband. So each sash, you're going to put the raw edges like this, about 1 inch in from the edge, and have the sashes going off the side. And now, just like we used the top of the apron to determine the length of the waistband, we are going to use the folded waistband to determine the tuck that we're going to put into the waistband. So you see, Well, let's actually put it right on there so we can see how it is folded over. And you'll see the waistband is slightly bigger. We don't want it sticking out. So what I do is I just take a really small tuck like that in the sash, make sure it's going to be well inside that waistband. And I overlap about an inch. And then I'm just going to put a little pin in that. And then I'm going to sew a rectangle to get that nice and secure. I'm going to tuck this side the same way. Now our last step is to attach the waistband, and it's just going to fold right over the top edge of your apron, and it's going to conceal the edge of your sashes and make it all look beautiful. Now, if you want to include a tag, you could put it in the back. So I'm going to get this lined up so the fold is on the top edge and these ends are lined up correctly. And then I'm just going to flip this back. I'm going to put my tag there. Do you put tags on things? Lots of people get them made with their names, or there's so many funny tags you can get now. Let me know in the comments if you're a tagger, not a tagger. So I pinned that where it needs to be, but because I'm going to be sewing from the front, I'm going to just pin again in the same spot to make sure that I catch that tag. And then I'm going to take the pin out of the back because that's going to be easier to take out as I sew. So once you get this all lined up, you just need to pin across this edge. And then we are going to sew all 4 of the sides. This 5-pocket apron is ready to roll. This is going to be one of the best smelling, easy sewing projects you are going to make, as long as you like the scent of dried lavender. We're going to make these eye pillows that are perfect for relaxation, for meditation. If you have a migraine, you can put it in the microwave, heat it up, and make it warm. You can put it in the freezer, make it colder for headaches, whatever you want. So let me show you what you need and how quick and easy these are to make. First, you're going to need 2 pieces of fabric, 9.5 inches wide by 5 inches high. If you were using non-directional fabric, you could grab a long scrap of fabric, fold it in half, and cut. Use the pattern that you can get when you sign up for my newsletter and cut this out. However, if you do that with a directional fabric like this, all of my flower stems are down here, you're going to end up with this. It's going to be the right direction on one side and upside down on the other side. Whoopsie, not a huge deal, but if that bothers you, you want to make sure you cut 2 separate pieces, put them right sides together with the bottom in the same place. The top is up here, the bottom is down here. Then I used a 1/2 cup of dried lavender, and I got that on Amazon, this really big thing. I have a couple more projects in mind for this. If you have a local lavender farm, you can probably get fresh local dried lavender as well. And then flaxseed. And this is whole flaxseed, not ground. It's easier to find ground flaxseed because that's used in cooking, but you want the whole seeds. Ground flax seeds is like putting flour in there. Not a good idea. And the reason I use flaxseed instead of rice is because if you're going to put this in the microwave or the freezer, this isn't going to absorb water the way rice kernels will. But it also still adds a nice little weight and will hold the heat if you heat it longer than rice. However, since you are putting this on your eyes, be really, really careful and just heat it for a few seconds and test it. Then you're going to need to make yourself a paper funnel if you don't have a funnel in your house. That is going to be to put the lavender and flaxseed into the container after we have it sewn together. Regular fabric scissors, pinking shears, or you can snip, snip, snip all these curves with little scissors, some pins, and then of course sewing machine thread. If you're going to want to put this in the microwave, make sure everything is 100% cotton. You also do not want to use starched fabric because this is to go on your eyes and it's supposed to be relaxing. You want it to be soft. You want it to be able to go around your nose and just be really comfortable on your face. Now, I don't sew any kind of channels in this. I let it flow wherever because A, it's easier and faster, and B, if the lavender stops smelling as much, you can just shake it up and it reactivates the scent. Let's get started. I have my 2 fabrics and I am just going to quickly pin my pattern down Now, if you are in my Sew with Tara Reid membership, you will not only get this template for free, but also written directions with lots of pictures. And if you're a Cricut owner, I also have an SVG file. If you wanted to have your Cricut machine or any other laser cutter or cutting machine cut the shape of the fabric. You can try it for $1. You get 7 days to jump in there, see what you think, decide if you want to stay. Then you can stay monthly, or if you join as an annual member, you pay less and you get a lot more. First, you get the peace of mind of just committing for a year. You don't have to think about it every month. You also get 2 months free when you join for a year, and I send you free fabric, which is a $40 value. I pay the shipping as well. And you get to pick what you want, because I want you to have fabric that you're going to want to sew with and use, and not just send you something random and you're like, don't really like that. So I want this to be a really, really good value. I want it to be an easy yes for you to jump in and join me and the other members of sewwithtarareid.com. All right, so we have that all cut out. Take the pins out, and then we're going to put the pins back in. You're going to leave the straight top section open. And what I like to do is I like to put 2 pins where I need to stop, because, sometimes when you're sewing, you get on a roll and you forget to stop. Not a problem. You can always use your seam ripper, but if you remember to stop, that's just a little bit easier. So I put 1 pin or clips all the way around, and then I put 2 where I want to stop sewing. Now off to the sewing machine. Now we're going to sew all the way around, but leaving an opening for turning and for filling. And we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam. Because flaxseed and dried lavender are pretty small, you need to use a small stitch length like you would if you were sewing quilt blocks. So I'm going to work with a 1.7 stitch length just to make sure nothing is going to fall out. Now my machine also has a handy button where if I push it, it's going to stop with the presser foot up. Amazing function on my little Janome. Now, using a small stitch length also means that it's going to be easier to sew those curves without having to pick your foot up as many times, but you still do a few times. Because this is a standalone thing, if you're not a super consistent 1/4 inch from every edge, it's okay. You just want the basic curves. This shape is really comfortable to have on your eyes because it does have that curve cutout for your nose. However, you can't put it into the wash because it's kind of hard to make a case for something this shape. Let me know in the comments if you would like to see another tutorial where we make one that is a rectangle with a removable case that you can wash. If you are going to use this when you have a lot of makeup on, I would just put a tissue down between this and your face to keep it cleaner. Now that we have that sewn, we're going to need to clip the curves. If you don't have pinking shears, I highly recommend you invest in them. I use them a lot for clipping corners, and I really like these Fiskars. Because of the grip that they have, it's much easier on your thumb than a more traditionally shaped scissor. I think they call it their Easy Action, and I will have a link below the video to find this on Amazon if you're interested. If you don't have this and you just want to do it the traditional way, you're just going to grab your small scissors and you're going to put itty bitty cuts into the fabric just to ease that fabric up. So then when you turn it right side out, the fabric is going to be able to spread out like that and give you that nice curve. If you don't do it, it's going to make little weird points. But definitely the easier way to go is to use pinking shears, cut close, but not on your stitches, and just go on all of the curves. Do not cut on the area that we left open for turning and filling, because we're going to need to fold that under and sew that shut. So you want to stop before you get to where that opening is. Now we're just going to turn that right side out. If you want to, you can press this so that those curves stay out, but I just want this to be a quick and easy project, so I'm just going to do it with my fingers. And then I'll just let the things we're going to put in there do the work for me. Next, we're going to grab our paper funnel. You're going to put that in that fabric, and then you're going to pour the lavender and the flaxseed in there. And make sure you make the top of your funnel as big as your container. The first time I did this, this was not as wide, and I ended up with half the lavender on my workspace. Then just slowly kind of shake it, because you need the lavender to move from the bottom. There we go. And then I'm just going to kind of push it to both sides so it's not in the way of the flaxseed. And then we're going to do the same thing with that. And I think I told you, but I'm doing about a half a cup of each. You can do more, you can do less, just kind of decide what feels right for you. And just kind of push that to the two sides, because now we want to sew this closed. We'll be able to mix it together by just shaking it later, but now we need to fold these edges under the area that we left open, and we're going to pin this closed and sew across. Now I want to give you a little tip about doing this. I do my pins at an angle when I'm going to be sewing closed, especially when there's small stuff that might try and sneak out while I'm sewing, because then you can sew with your needle closer to the pin than if you had it straight. You can get all the way up here, like right here, and it's still, this needle is still holding it here. You can do that all the time, but I especially do it when I'm closing things like this. All right, 3 pins should be good. Now you'll notice on this one, I didn't take the time to change the thread to match the fabric. I wish I had. So this one's going to look a little bit better because the white thread that I have in my sewing machine is going to just blend right in with that fabric. And now, still with the short stitch length so that none of the flaxseed and lavender comes out, we're going to sew this opening closed. And for this, you want to pull up your bobbin thread so that you don't have a knot on the back of your eye pillow. So hold that top thread. Put your needle down, lift it, give the top thread a little yank. I always keep tweezers by my sewing machine to pull that up because then I'm not grabbing my finger on the needle regularly. And it also helps me push that top thread under the foot. So get both of the threads under the foot, hold them, and then just sew forward and back a few stitches to knot. And sew a few more stitches before you let go of that thread to make sure your machine doesn't, by mistake, pull that under. Never sew over your pins, but like I said, you can get really close when they're at an angle. And you want to try and keep your flaxseed and your lavender away from the presser foot and the edge. You don't want it falling into your machine, and you really don't want to sew it either. That is how easy it is. Now, to mix the flaxseed and the lavender, just kind of move it with your fingers, push it to one end, push it to the other. It'll just mix in there, and that will also activate the scent. Oh, it smells so good in here. I wish you could smell it. So I think you can whip these up in probably 10 minutes or less. So this is a great quick scrap fabric project. This would be perfect for Mother's Day, for anyone that you know that suffers from migraines, or a mom that just wants to relax. Just imagine putting the little bit of weight and the lovely scent of lavender if you're in the bathtub, or you're meditating, or at yoga, or going to sleep. Since it doesn't take very long, it would also be a great project to sew and sell if you want to make money for vacation, for supplies, for a new sewing machine, whatever it is. So I would love to know what you think, who you're going to make it for first. Let me know in the comments, and happy sewing. Today I'm going to show you another quick project that is great for stocking stuffers, gifts, girls' trips, family vacations, long plane rides, whatever. It's how to make a simple sleep or eye mask, depending on what you call it. And I'm going to show you how to make it where you fussy cut it to put exactly what you want on your mask, like I did with these snowmen, or to use just a more tossed pattern where it doesn't matter exactly where you put your template. What you need is this template, which is free on my website at tarareed.com/sleep-mask. Then, and this is about just slightly over 9 inches wide and 4.5 inches tall. So this is also a great project for some of your scraps. So I grabbed a piece of the snowman again, but with red. That's going to be the front. Then a polka dot for the back. You can make these, you can do these reversible too. It really doesn't matter which way, so that you could do it that way. You could do it that way. You're just basically flipping the elastic. So do 2 different things so you have options, but I would recommend not doing anything too light, like a white background, especially if someone might have makeup still on their face. Then you need a piece of fusible fleece about the same size, and then a 14-inch piece of elastic. All right, so first let's talk about fussy cutting. So to fussy cut, you need to figure out exactly where you want your designs, and you're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if it goes over that selvage a teeny bit, it's still going to be okay. So I'm just going to angle that, and I'm just going to keep folding it up so I can see, make sure I'm not too much over the selvage, but that my snowmen are going to be on here and not hitting the seam allowance. Okay, so right like that. Move that there. I like to cut it all together so the size is correct. So then I'm gonna, oh, whoops, don't do that. A little overzealous, my flipping. Okay, then I'm gonna put my backing right side down because I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna cut this as a sandwich the way it's gonna go so that when we pin it together, it's going to be good sizing. And then I'm just gonna put that on top of all of it and pin it together. It does tell you on the template what to cut, and then there's a test square. So you wanna make sure that is 1 inch by 1 inch before you do the project, because if you didn't choose cut actual size when you printed it, your printer might have made it a little bit smaller, and then you'll have a child size one. So now I'm just going to carefully cut around. All right, so we have that cut out. I'm just going to take the pins out. Okay, isn't that going to be cute how that ended up in the center? So now I'm going to take the fusible fleece. Oh, and I cut it so that it's going to fuse to the back. It doesn't really matter which way. And I'm going to take it over to the ironing board and just press and fuse that together. All right, so I have a different method where you're going to be able to make these really quickly if you're using just a toss pattern where it doesn't really matter what part of the print is going to be on your mask. So what I do in this case is I cut out the fusible fleece. So I cut out a bunch of the mask shape out of the fusible fleece, take some of my scraps of fabric and press the fleece onto the fabric before I cut the fabric. Then I'm going to grab a fabric for the opposite side. I'm going to put that face up. I'm going to put this face down. You also want that to not matter, so just to be a basic print. I'm going to put this face down, making sure that the whole mask is on this because this piece is obviously wider than that. And then I'm going to pin that together and cut it out. So you could do whole strips of them. Like if you had long strips, you could do 1, 2, 3, 4 and really create a little assembly line. Now that I fused the fleece to the backing, I'm going to put the right side up and I'm going to grab my elastic, and this is just going to be attached straight across. So I'm going to pin that. I'm going to pin it really close to the edge because I just want to double check. I mean, if you're making this for you or your family, always double check the size. Otherwise, 14 inches is a pretty good guess that it's going to work on most heads. But if you want to check the size, just pin it like that. And then I would do it this way so you don't, less likely to stab yourself. Very gently put that on your head to test, but we're going to assume that it's fine. So now there's 2 ways to do this. You can go and baste the elastic, but in the interest of time, I just will put the right side down on top and then hold that elastic in place, put this down, and make sure I pin through the elastic. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I don't know, I'm all about time efficiency. I'm going to do that. And then you're just going to pin the rest of the way around. All right, then you're going to take it to the sewing machine. You're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I usually double back on the elastic just in case, just to make it a little bit more secure, and leave a section of the flat part at the top open so that you can turn it right side out. Okay, so I left a section open for turning, but before you turn it right side out, you're just going to need to go around the curves and clip so that it's going to turn nicely and give you a smooth curve. And if there are parts that look a little bit thick, you can always trim that back a little bit. I might be a slightly overzealous trimmer, but I figure too much is better than none, and just make sure you're not getting too close or, heaven forbid, cutting through your stitch lines. So now that I have that all trimmed, I'm just going to very gently turn that right side out. And if you flip the fabric where you started and ended and then push through, you're going to put less strain on the edge of that sewing. All right, and then you can just use your fingers to puff that out, or you can use a turning tool. But it's pretty big. You can just rub your finger along that curve. And that is good to go. So now you just need to take it and press the edges and press this under so that when we top stitch, you're not going to see where it was left open. And be very careful not to press your elastic because it might melt. So now this is all pressed, so you can't really see where that opening was, and it is good to go. We're going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and I put a dark red thread in the top and black in the bobbin so that whichever side you put out, you're not going to really notice that stitch line. And that's all there is to it. Just make this as a stocking stuffer, or give it just because, or how cute would it be with a matching pillowcase? If flowering trees make you or your mom sneeze, you need to make this next project. If you keep tissues on you, would you rather carry this pack or this pack? I'm going to guess that if you sew, you're going to want the prettier one made out of fabric. And all it takes is 2 scraps of fabric to make this beautiful tissue holder with a cute little trim. So I'm going to show you how to do it, but there's one option that you have in making this. So these are made from the same size fabric. This one, I didn't make little box corners, so it sticks out a little bit more. This one, I added that boxed corner, so it's a little bit more finished and polished, but it does take a little bit more time. So if you're making a lot of them for stocking stuffers, teacher gifts, etc., and you just want to crank them out, I would go with this way, because if people don't see this, they're not going to know. Or if you just really want to add that extra touch, I'm going to show you how to do that too. Let's get started. The first thing we need are 2 pieces of fabric. They are both 5.5 inches high with a 1 inch difference in the width. 6.5 inches wide and 7.5 inches wide. The wider one is going to be the lining. So you need a little bit extra to do the lining and this super cute little trim. So just remember, whatever you want to be the main print of your tissue cover is the smaller piece. And then whatever you want to have on the inside and this trim accent piece is going to be the larger piece. Then we're simply going to line up one of these edges. We're going to sew straight down there. It's going to buckle a little bit because, again, they're not the same length. We're going to sew that other side as well. All right, once you have that sewn together, you'll see this part's straight. This has got a little loop, so it's almost like a little cave. We are going to turn it right side out. And I don't press the seams open. I just kind of make sure they kind of fold in the same direction all along the seam, usually towards the smaller fabric. And you're just going to get it flattened and kind of adjust it left and right so that these 2 sides are going to be even, because that is going to be the accent. We're basically making the opposite of this one. So this is going to be our main fabric we'll see, and this is going to be the lining. Once you get that done, you're just going to give it a little press. The next step is we are going to fold it so that they meet right in the center. And you can really eyeball that if you want to measure it. You can mark the center, but I have found that just folding these in, you can really get a good feel for it without that extra step. Then I just finger press this. I'm going to grab a pin and I'm going to pin each side just to make sure that it is staying. And now we're going to take that back to the sewing machine. Let's get these 2 seams sewn just with a straight stitch, 1/4 inch from the edge, and I'm going to double back where they meet because that is going to be your stress point for your tissue pack as you're putting full packs of tissues in and out of this holder. And now I'm just going to repeat on the other side. So I took my scissors and I trimmed that so there's not a bunch of threads. And now we are going to put it down and do a zigzag stitch. I have mine set at 4.4 wide and about a 1.5 stitch length because we're not doing applique, we're just edging this seam. Now, I'm also going to grab a little piece of fabric because sometimes when you want to start right on the edge and you have like a couple layers, sometimes it kind of gets stuck. So I have found that putting another piece of fabric, so I'm going to butt that right up next to it, and I'm going to put that under my foot so that those feed dogs have something to grab onto that isn't part of what we're doing, but it's going to help everything move a little bit more smoothly. I think they call it a guide fabric. There's some term for it, but I can't remember exactly what it is. Look right here, I'll look it up and I'll put it on the video. Let's do a little ziggy zaggy. That little piece of fabric worked great. You'll see it did not end up attached to the tissue at all. We have a beautiful zigzag that's going to help with any fraying. Just going to cut those threads off, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So this can be done. We can just turn it right side out, push those corners out, and we can have a great tissue cover. But I'm going to show you the next step if you want to make the boxed corners like the original one that I showed you. So to do this boxed corner, we are going to pull this fabric out and make a triangle here. And then I'm just going to take a ruler and I'm going to mark 3/8 of an inch, just draw a line, 3/8 of an inch from the point. And I'm going to sew on that, and I'm going to do that for all 4 corners. Make sure you switch back to a straight stitch to do these box corners. And on each side, just make sure you have this seam folding the same direction so that that lays nice and flat instead of having it go like that and then you have this twist in there. So you'll see this takes a little bit longer because you're having to fold, mark, and stitch each of these corners. But as I said, it does give a little bit more finished look to it. So for something a little fancier, like a wedding, I would definitely take the time. But if I decided I wanted to make like 40 of these, I would probably not take the time. So now I have one with the box pleats that I just showed you, and then I also did another one that is plain. So let's get some tissues into these. Now, if you're using them for yourself, I would recommend, how I like to do it, is I just take all of the tissues out of the plastic, and then I put them in the cover. But let me show you, there is a right and a wrong side to the pile of tissues. So this one has both sides are folded. So that's the bottom. You want to make sure the one where the tissue is going to pop up is on top when you put them in your holder. So then I just put the one side in. This does fit nice and snug. It seems like it might not fit at first, but once you get it in there and smooth it out, it's perfect. Then I get the other side in. Like I said, just kind of adjust that a teeny bit. And look at how great that looks. You're not seeing any of the plastic there. So again, this is what I do if I'm using them for myself. But if you're going to be giving these to somebody or selling them, I would just leave them in the plastic and put the plastic in. And then the same way, but just keeping the plastic on. So now we have that, and then the people can pull it out. But you'll see, you can kind of see that color in the UPC code. So I don't love it as much, but again, for others, you want to do that. So now tell me which you prefer. Are you team, let's get it done fast and just have these edges a little bit pointy? Or are you, nope, I wanted a little more professional look and I'm going to take the time to do those box corners. Drop me a comment and let me know because I'm very curious which team will win. If you're a fan of 2.5-inch pre-cut strips that you buy in little packs like this, I'm going to show you how to turn your extra scraps into nail file holders. And I'm going to show you how you can make them for any size nail file. Have you ever stuck your hand in your purse and inadvertently messed up your nail or scratched the top of your polish with one of the nail files in there? Ugh, it is the worst. This is where cute little fabric nail file holders come into play. Now, most nail files come in these 2 sizes. You can get those real little skinny ones too. The 7 inches and then the 3.5-inch long. And you can buy these in bulk. You will be shocked at how inexpensive they are on Amazon. You can get like 100 to 200 of these for $5 to $10. And these for 100, you can get between, I think, $5 and $12. It just depends. If you want to just go with a basic color, it's going to be less expensive than something fun. This is an incredibly budget-friendly project. Let's start with this one. I am going to cut it to 14.5 inches long. Now, the way you figure out the length that you need is you measure the length of your nail file, you multiply it by 4, and you add 1/2 inch. Now we're just going to fold it, matching the short ends. We're going to take it to the sewing machine and just sew straight down both sides. Now we're going to sew each side with a 1/4 inch seam. Now, if you're going to be making more than one at a time, just daisy chain, go down one side of all of them and then the other side, and you can just clip them off and keep going in one long strip. From one 40-inch strip of 2.5 inch wide fabric, you can make one long and one short nail file holder. Now I'm just going to clip these corners a teeny bit on the folded end so that it's going to make a better point when we turn that right side out. And I like to do really long angled to get a lot of that fabric out of there. If you have tube turners, this is the perfect project for it. I use the 1/2 inch. If you don't, you're just going to use your fingers, turn these right side out. But let me show you how this tube turner works. You put the hollow part into your project. It's even more important on longer ones. And then you take your stick with the pointier end going in first, and you push the fabric into the tube and pull it. See how fast that is? Now, when you use the pointy part, you can then use that as your turner and push those corners out. You want to do that really slowly and gently so that you don't all of a sudden see that point come through your fabric and get really bummed. So that's set. If I didn't have the tube turner, I could turn this right side out like you turn anything right side out. Push that in, pull it out as best you can. It's a little harder on your fingers. It takes a lot longer without this tool. And it's very inexpensive. They're usually under $10 for a set of 3. And I use them for so many different projects. I would highly recommend you go grab one. I will have a link to find it on Amazon, or you can find it in most sewing stores, Michael's, places like that. So imagine how much of a pain that would be to do by hand. But with the tube turner, it is lickety split. And this is the size for one of the longer nail files. So I pulled it down. You don't want to pull this off until you have the fabric through, because you want to hold that fabric, pull that down, pull that off. But see how fast that was? These are amazing if you're making aprons and have those really long straps. You can turn them right side out in a jiffy. So now let's take all 3 of these. We're just going to make 3 at once today. We're going to take all 3 of these to the ironing board. So what we need to do is we need to get these seams pulled out evenly. We don't want it to be folded over. Like, we don't want any of the fabric tucked in as we press. So I usually just take my fingers and I move them back and forth and get one side good and iron that side, and then press down with the tailor's clapper. And then I come and do the other side. I find trying to do both at the same time, I often end up with one side not quite right, where it's, not pulled out as much, and then it's not going to be straight. And then I'm using this to help cool off the fabric and really set that so it is nice and flat. So I'm going to get all 3 of these to that same stage, and then we are going to press those raw edges in, and we are going to sew across the top to basically make a closed fabric tube. Turn that under about a 1/4 inch. If you go a little bit further, it's totally fine. This is not a quilt block, so it's not something that needs to be super precise. Just make sure it is folded and even. And then press that. I've seen other tutorials where people use interfacing or even a stiff interfacing to make the nail holders harder, but I really don't think it's necessary because the nail file is going to do that for you. And I am all about quick and easy projects with as few materials as possible. So let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be and just use a piece of fabric. And as you can see, if you just do each step multiple times, you can really whip out a bunch of these at once. So that does make it a great gift, a great project or idea to sew and sell, because you can use your fabric scraps. It's not going to take you a lot of time. The nail files aren't expensive, and it is a great impulse purchase if you sell at craft fairs or online. These are all pressed and ready, so we're going to go back to the machine and we're going to sew straight across the open edges of all three. If you want your thread to coordinate so it's not very visible, you could pick something that matches. But because I'm doing a few, I'm just going to use white thread so that I can get all three of these done quickly. And I did one where it matched the green, so I'll be able to show you the difference that the thread can make. I'm going to use a little leader fabric, which is just a little scrap piece of fabric that I'm going to put behind what I am sewing, because then I can start back here. I don't have to worry about pulling up the bobbin thread, and I can just sew right onto here, back stitch, and get that sewed closed. So you're not going to have any kind of a bird's nest on the project, and you don't have to take that time to pull up the bobbin thread. I like to do that when I'm starting off of the edge of a project. Just makes it easier and faster. So we have all three of those. Now we're just going to take that leader fabric off the back so that we can use it again. Snip these apart, cutting off the excess thread in between if there is any. And we're going to go back to the workspace. I'm going to show you how to decide how much to fold these up before we finish the sewing. Isn't this easy? Who are you going to make them for first? I would love to know. Now we are going to fold these up and sew them together. So this one, the nail file is almost all the way in. You can also make them longer and have them flap over, but this is the quickest and easiest way. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your strips of fabric and you're going to put the folded side up. Then you're going to place your nail file on there and you're going to fold it up. If you want it to be exactly like that, you can just sew here and here as two separate stitch lines. But because I like things to move a little bit faster, I like to sew down, across, and up and be done. Which means this is going to stick out a little bit more because you're going to lose here. So see, that's where the edge of that nail file is. So now it's coming across the top. So I'm gonna just move this down a little bit more, fold that up, because I want my file to not go above the backing. So that is how long I want that one. I'm just going to put a little clip in there and do the same thing on this one. And oh my gosh, isn't this tape measure perfect with the little quilt block fabric? Love it. So I'm pushing to make sure there's about a 1/2 inch up there, because then when I push that up a little to accommodate for the stitching that's going to go across there, we know how much it's going to come out. And if you don't want as much sticking out, just use a longer strip of fabric. Back to the sewing machine, we are almost done. Now on the last step, I taught you a trick to not have to pull the bobbin thread up, but here you're going to need to, because we're starting in the center of fabric. There's fabric in front and behind where you're starting, and you're going to see the back. What you do is you hold the top thread, put your foot down, put your needle down, lift your needle, give a little tug, and then I always keep tweezers so that I can grab that without poking my finger. It also helps me push those threads down, get it under the foot. Now I'm going to hold both of these threads as I take my first few stitches forward and back to knot. And that will prevent the machine from pulling that thread under and creating what we love to call bird's nests. They are so quick and easy to sew. Throw them in your purse. These make great gifts. Teacher appreciation, they could be shower favors, you could put them into a little self-care box, a manicure gift, so many things that you can do with these. So that one is done. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the other two. All that's left is to add the nail files. How cute is that? Let me know in the comments if you're going to give this as a solo gift, if you're going to make a little manicure, pedicure gift pack with it, what you plan to do. I'm always curious about what people do with my projects. Make sure you have subscribed to my channel, hit that bell so YouTube lets you know every time I post something new, and let's have some fun sewing together. And then don't forget, I also have a membership at sewwithtarareed.com where you can find lots of tutorials. They will get written directions for this as well as the video tutorial with no ads. There's also exclusive content and many other things. You can try it for only $1 for 7 days. Jump in there, see if you like it, and hopefully you will decide to stay. There is a link below the video so you can find more information about that. Welcome back. In today's episode, we are going to be making this really easy zipper pouch. I was able to get my hands on some Barbie fabric licensed by the Riley Blake Designs, the fabric company that I also work with. So we're going to be doing hot pink outside, and look at these cute little shoes we're going to put inside. Of course, you can use any fabric that you want, but I thought it would be fun to use this while we all are in hot pink Barbie movie mania. Let's get started. To get started, you need some materials. So to make a bag this size, which has a finished size of about 6 inches by 10 inches, and I did put about a 1-inch box pleat on the bottom of that, we're going to take 2 pieces of fabric, outside, inside, 10.5 inches wide by 14.5 inches long. If you're using a directional fabric, you need your fabric to be going this way because the bag is going to fold like this. I have already added fusible fleece to the back of our lining just to save time. And I used the Pellon 987F fusible fleece. It's one that I just always keep on hand. I like it just to give a little bit more stiffness and body to bags and different projects. Then I'm going to use a pink zipper. You can use a 9-inch zipper, but I often like to use zippers that are longer than my project, especially if you are new to zippers. This is going to be easier for you to sew on because you will be able to get your zipper completely out of the way as long as you have it lined up correctly, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm also going to share my trick for how to make zippers sewing easier using this Easy Steam 2 two-sided adhesive fusible tape. This thing, game changer. It took the stress of zippers away. Absolutely love it. Then we have cut a piece that is 15 inches by 2 inches for the little strap. I have a little lobster clasp on a D-ring to put on that. And then you just need a little piece for this little loop here that you can hook things onto. Let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get these ends out of the way. So I'm going to open this a little bit, just so it's not in the way of us dealing with those ends. I'm going to grab my Easy Steam adhesive. I'm going to put a little piece right on the top here, and then you're just going to press down on that. And then you're going to just carefully peel the paper off of it. Sometimes you have to get your nail or even a pin under it just to get the sticky part to come off and stay on the zipper. Then we are going to fold that tab down, and it's going to have to go at an angle so that it doesn't cover the metal part of the zipper stop. Now, if you don't have this adhesive, you could glue that down. You could also use a pin and go put a little stitch in that to hold it down, but this really works great, and I love this stuff for the next part of the zipper, so I highly recommend that you give it a try. Okay, so we have them both tacked down. You want to put your lining fabric, which you have your fusible fleece or interfacing on, face up on your workspace. Then you're going to open your zipper wider than the fabric, and we're going to flip it over for right now, and we're going to put the Easy Steam 2 tape along the back of the zipper and take the paper off. Now we're going to turn it back over so that the zipper pull is up, and we're going to line this up with the top edge of our lining fabric. And you want the metal zipper part to be about 1/4 inch to 5/8 of an inch from the edge of your fabric. When you have that lined up nicely, nice and straight along the top edge, you're going to press down and adhere that to the fabric. And you can move it a little bit. You can see it looks a little bit crooked. So we're going to just keep adjusting till it looks nice and straight. Now we're going to grab another piece of this tape and we're going to go across the top. And this is what we're going to attach the outer fabric to. You don't want it to be too close to the zipper teeth. You want it to be towards the outer edge where we're going to be sewing. Now we're going to take our outer fabric, we're going to turn it over, we're going to make sure that we pay attention and get it lined up so it's staying straight over top of the lining, and we're going to line up this top edge right over top of the zipper and press down. This, my friends, is a game changer in the zipper business. If you don't have this and you want to do the zipper, you can also put the 3 together and clip it, but you have a lot more chance of things moving a little bit as you're sewing if you're just clipping versus adhering it like this. Now we're going to sew the zipper. We're going to keep the
pull way out here, so it's not going to get in the way at all. This piece is just going to hang off. Going to use a zipper foot, and you're just going to sew right along the edge so that this zipper will be in straight. So now we have that for the one side. I'm going to take this really quick to my ironing board, and I'm going to press it so that both sides are pulled away from the zipper, and then we're going to come back and top stitch. I just pressed that so it's nice and even. Now with the zipper foot still in, I'm just going to run a quick top stitch right along the edge. I'm going to keep using the white thread. You can change to a hot pink if you want to, or whatever color coordinates, totally up to you. One side is done. Let's head back to the workstation and I'll show you how to line up the other side of the zipper. Now we need to do the same thing, tape these two fabrics onto this half of the zipper. So let's get started. We need to close the zipper halfway just to make sure we have all of the teeth lined up evenly, because if we don't have the teeth lined up evenly, when we attach this, then the zipper's not going to work and everything's going to pull. You make sure the metal's going to be lined up, everything's good to go. We're going to run a piece of this tape along the top of the zipper at this outer edge. Okay, going to get that tape on, then make sure you have the zipper lined up again. And now what we are going to do is we are going to fold our outer fabric up. And before we attach it, we want to make sure that it's staying straight along this edge. And then we need to get it lined up with that edge of the zipper. So sometimes it's a little bit easier to turn it over to be able to see exactly where we're going. So don't press firmly until you know that you have everything lined up well. So now you'll see we have this loop of the outer fabric, and now we need to deal with the inner fabric. So we're going to turn that back over again, and we're going to put the tape along this side of the zipper. Now we're going to fold this side up, making sure again it's staying lined up on both sides and that the top is lined up with the edge of the zipper and the top of the outer fabric, basically making a zipper sandwich. And again, if you don't have this tape, you can do the same thing and use pins or clips. So this is what it looks like on the side. We basically have two loops of fabric and the zipper. And because we have this nice and secure where we want it, and we are using a longer zipper so that that pull isn't in our way while we sew, I'm going to reach my hands in here and I'm going to open that zipper. So I'm going to pull that out so it is not in our way. I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to sew this zipper just like we did the last one. Now we're going to use our zipper foot and sew this zipper. Now I'm going to turn this right side out and I'm going to press that and bring it back to top stitch just like we did last time. Now we're going to make the little loop for attaching things like this little wristlet, which we are also going to be making. So we have our fabric. This is 1.5 by 2.5 for the loop. And this one is 15 by 2 for the wristlet. I don't keep water in my iron. I like to just mist with a little sprayer bottle. Fold that in half, iron that, and that's going to create a nice little crease for us. We're going to open that back up, and then we're going to fold these raw edges into the crease. And on this one that is so small, you can just finger press that outer edge, fold it again, and press again. All right, so that one is ready. Now we're going to make the wristlet strap. I'm going to put it like this, and I've already spritzed this with water. So because this one is so long, it's next to impossible to get it straight and finger press. So I'm going to do each side at a time, folding that raw edge into the crease and pressing along that edge without pressing the center crease out of my fabric. So you're just kind of using the tip and moving along. Have you ever used a tailor's clapper? It's really cool. I'm going to show you what it does. So a tailor's clapper or a quilter's clapper is basically a piece of wood that has this nice groove that's really easy to hold, and it helps you really set your creases. A lot of quilters really like it because when they're pressing seams open, it gets a nice sharp edge to it. I like to use it for things like this too, because as you go along, sometimes it pops up a little bit. So if you come back with this wood, it takes the heat out of it. And you press down and it keeps it really flat and it makes that fold a lot sharper. Now we're going to go back to the sewing machine. We're going to just do a quick stitch here so that we can make that loop when we put the whole bag together. And I'm going to show you how to sew this together and get the lobster clasp with the D-ring on this piece. So we're just going to run a stitch really close to the edge to keep this together. And this is going to be the little loop for the bag. Now we're going to do the wristlet loop that is going to have this on here. So we are going to go down the edge to sew this fold together so that our raw edges are never to be seen again. And we're going to leave about 1 inch to 1.5 inches open on each end. Okay, so for our wristlet, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the clasp onto the fabric. Then we are going to open these ends and we are going to pin them with the right sides together. Now we are just going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam across that front. I never sew across pins because I have hit more than I care to and bent needles. Go back to your iron and press this seam open and then press this folded closed again so that you can stitch and finalize that and it won't be really visible how you got this loop put together. So I'm going to go do that. I'll be right back. Before I do this stitch to get these all together, I want to make sure one more time that it's not twisted. If it is twisted, just grab your seam ripper, open that up and redo it. I'm just going to finish this edge stitch, turn that so it is coming out of the circle. Then you're just going to fold right like that. So we have that seam that we just sewed right there at that D-ring. And now I'm just going to run a little stitch here to hold that in place. Now we have our detachable Barbie wristlet that you can use on this bag or other things. Let's go finish up that bag. We're getting so close. Now what we're going to do is we're going to close this zipper halfway so that the zipper pull is on the inside and the lining is on the outside. And we are going to move it, because it's basically just a big old roll, right? A roll with a zipper. We're going to move it to however high you want your zipper to be from the top. This one that I did, it's about 1.5 inches down. I think I'm going to try this one a little bit higher. So I'm going to make it about 1 inch from that top fold. Now we're going to make sure that these edges are all lined up. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 pins up here to make sure that this zipper stays in place. And I'm going to put them in far enough that I don't have to take them out while I'm sewing. But we want to make sure that these little metal hooks stay lined up. Then, always handy to have one as a sample, right? I like to have the hook on the opposite side of where the zipper is closed. So when this zipper is closed, it's going to be over here. So we are going to put this loop over here above the zipper. Speaking of the zipper, it is time to cut it off. Just a plastic zipper teeth. So you can cut it with scissors, but don't use your fabric scissors. You don't want to mess them up. Use some craft scissors and just cut that off even with the edge. So we're done. Thank you very much. Little zipper piece that made our zipper life easier. Off you go. So now this, I'm going to fold in half. The raw edges, I'm going to line up with these raw edges and I'm going to just put that right in there above the zipper. And I'm going to clip that with a clip. I'm going to clip both sides in place and we're going to sew straight down here and then we're going to zigzag. Now you need to decide if you're going to do just a flat bag, you're just going to start sewing now. But see on this one, I gave it a little bit of a box corner. So if you want to do that, we're going to make some marks now. To make a 1.5 inch box pleat, you're going to measure up 3/4 inch. So you're going to measure up from the bottom half the distance that you want your bag to be wide. So if you wanted it to be 3 inches wide, you're going to measure up 1.5 inches. So that would be a much deeper box and shallower bag. So we're going to do 3/4 inch. And I'm just going to take this pen. It's a heat sensitive pen. It will disappear when you iron it. It's really cool. Oh, great. I picked right at a pink shoe. Of course I did. So we can see that. And I'm just marking this now to save some time because we're going to go straight all the way down. But then when we zigzag, we're only going to go to this line because we need to be able to make that box. And because I'm not sure which side I'm going to have to fold it, I'm going to mark it on both sides. Okay, we're in the home stretch. Back to the sewing machine. Now we're going to go straight down with a 1/4 inch seam. And if you lined this up correctly, you should be just on this side of these metal things. Just go really slow when you're going over the zipper part and make sure you do not hit that metal or you will definitely have a broken needle. And I do like to go backwards over the zippers just to make sure it is nice and secure. And now we're going to do the other side. Now on this side, we are going to be sewing through some of those plastic teeth. So just go really slowly. And also remember that the little loop is right here. So we're going to go from here to here. We're going to go forward, back, and then forward just to secure that zipper and that loop. Just go slow. Now just take a minute and cut off some of these frayed edges before you do your zigzag. You can also take out these pins now. All right, can you see my needles right here? I'm going to switch to a zigzag stitch, and you'll see it moved over to the right. And that is basically going to be the outside of the zigzag. So I'm going to have that needle position right off the edge of my fabric, and then I'm just going to zigzag all the way to this line. Now, if you were keeping it flat, it's time to turn it, but we're going to do these little boxed corners. So what we're going to do, so you're going to make it a triangle right at that line. So it's even on both sides, and then you're just going to stitch across in a straight line. It's all over except the turning right side out. We're going to start to flip it, and then I like to just put my hand in here and open that zipper more because it just makes it that much easier. I'm going to open those beautiful box corners, and then we're going to flip and push out those top corners. And there's our little loop. So how would you use a bag like this? Would you put makeup in it? You could use it in your car. This could also be super cute for a slumber party favor. Fill them with like some candy, a hairbrush, maybe a scrunchie or a sleep mask. I'd love to know what you think you would use this kind of a bag for.
Let's make cute little fabric envelopes. They are the perfect size for gift cards, for cute little notes, carry a bunch of credit cards if you don't want to carry a big old wallet, whatever you want. Now, I love doing them where they have the shape of an envelope. You can also make them where it is straight across, which requires a teeny bit less cutting, but I think it's going to be worth it. I'm going to show you how to do it. And then also these stitch lines that really give that envelope feel. So let's first look at the supplies. The way I have designed these mini envelopes, you can make them out of 10-inch fabrics. So if you have 10-inch pre-cuts, you can use 2 of them and you can make 2 envelopes, or you can take 2 pieces of 5 inches by 10-inch fabric to make these. I just thought some of us have these hanging around, so I would make it so that you have something really efficient to use all of this fabric. Next, you're going to need the template, and this is a free template. If you are on my email list, you can go sign up. It'll automatically be emailed to you. If you're not on my email list, you can sign up. You'll need to click a double opt-in confirmation to make sure no one else is signing you up for my email list, and then you will get this. I'm going to be using a lightweight interfacing. I'm a big proponent of using what you have on hand, which is why I am using this featherweight interfacing. You can use whatever you have. You want it to give a little bit of body to your envelope, but you don't want it to be too stiff or too thick. Then you're going to need some pins, a pencil, something to help turn corners. I have this little turning tool. You could use a chopstick. You could use a pencil, whatever you want. I'm going to be using pinking shears to make the stamp. You can close it a few different ways. I'm going to show you how to use the cam snaps because they're fun and I love them. If you don't have them, don't want to get them, you can also just use a little scrap of Velcro to do that closure. You could also do a buttonhole and sew on a button. That's totally up to you. Then you need your basics: ruler, mat, rotary cutter. So let's get started. As I mentioned in the supplies section, you can make 2 envelopes out of 2 10-inch pre-cut pieces of fabric, or you can use scraps of fabric that are each 5 inches wide by 10 inches high. And if you are using directional fabric, you want it to be wide by high, and you need the direction going like this. I'll talk more about direction in a minute. I'm going to show you how to do it with the 10-inch. You'll figure out how to do it with the 5-inch. So you can put your interfacing on the back of either side. I usually put it on whatever fabric I'm going to use for the lining, just because if you don't adhere it perfectly and it gets a little bit wrinkled, you won't see it as much on the inside. But hopefully we're going to do a good job. Now I have this interfacing, and I cut it slightly smaller than 10 inches inches. Well, you'll see quite a bit smaller than 10 inches. But because this is going to be on the inside, I decided I did not want to run to the store and get more interfacing. I'm just going to piece this together and no one is ever going to know. So I have put this face down. You can feel the bumps or sometimes it's shiny depending on what product you're using. You want that next to the back of your fabric because that is what is going to fuse or stick to your fabric. You do not want it to fuse to your iron. Then you're going to read the directions on the back of your product. And this one says to cover with a damp cloth. And I can't find my pressing cloth at the moment, so I'm just going to use 2 pieces of white fabric so I can still kind of see where my square is. And it says to dampen it. So this is just a mister bottle with water. They're really handy for ironing. You can get them on Amazon. I have my iron set to wool, and then it says to press down for 10 seconds to fuse this. So we're just going to hold this down and move across the fabric. Now I'm going to lift and press every time I move. I'm not going to slide the iron like I am ironing a shirt because we don't want that interfacing to slide at all because it really was close to the edge of the fabric and I don't want to all of a sudden fuse it to my ironing board mat. So as you can guess, if you're working with fabric scraps, you would have just cut a piece of interfacing that was 5 inches by 10 inches and adhered it to the back of one of your fabrics because we're using these 10-inch squares. I just did it all at once. So I'm going to put these together. I'm just cutting them in half, so it really doesn't matter if they're right sides together because we're going to be moving them again. Grab my ruler, put that 5-inch line right along the edge. Make sure I have that nice and straight. Cut that in half. And now I have fabrics to make 2 envelopes from those 2 pieces. Well, 3 because I did it before 2. The next step is to cut with our template. And if you didn't get the free template, that's totally fine. You can just cut a point on one end and then you can cut this shape or you can do straight on the other end. Now, the tricky part and the part that seems kind of weird is if you're going to be using a directional fabric, the point needs to be at the bottom of the fabric, not at the top. See, so the direction's going this way and we're going to put this down here. If it's just a random toss, it doesn't matter at all which end each of the templates goes on. But let me show you why. It is because when this becomes the outside or the lining, it's going to fold up like this and fold down like this to be the flap. So you want to make sure this flower on the flap is right side up and not upside down. So this is right side up. That's right side up. That's going to be upside down. But we're not going to worry about that. We're keeping this simple. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to place this template and I'm just doing it on the fabric that does not have the interfacing. Grab a ruler and I'm going to cut those 2 angles. So the point is cut and now we need to do the bottom. You can either put it like this and pin it and cut all 3 of those lines. But what I like to do that's a little bit faster and easier is to fold this in half and just finger press that so it's flat. And then I fold my template in half and I put the fold on the fold and the point matching the bottom of the fabric. And then I'm just going to pin that and cut that by hand. Now, if you do have a cutting machine and you like to use your cutting machine for fabric, like a Cricut or a Scan and Cut Silhouette, there is an SVG file. But there we go. Now we have that shape. So you can either cut that shape on a cutting machine or just quickly cut that by hand. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put these right sides together, and the orientation doesn't matter because the inside is non-directional. And then I'm going to pin this. Now, a lot of people would cut both of them and then pin them together, but I don't because you're going to have to do a lot of trimming after you sew these together, and it just saves a step. And then if things aren't matching absolutely perfectly because you've hand cut, it is not going to be a problem. I keep the pins pretty far in, so I'm not going to have to take them off as I'm sewing 1/4 inch from each side. Now, one other tip, and this is great if you're teaching somebody to sew, or I actually still do it all the time myself, is when you have these really deep points, I take a ruler and I draw with pencil where that 1/4 inch is. And I love this ruler because this blue line is exactly 1/4 inch. So it is really quick and easy to get that lined up. I get the inside of the blue lined up with the edge of the fabric. And so I just do a few of these lines where I know I'm going to need to pivot. And you could do this before you put the pins in. Might be a little bit easier, but I didn't. I forgot. So you don't have to do it all the way around, just where you're going to be pivoting your needle while you're sewing. This is really, really helpful when you're teaching people to sew, teaching kids to sew. It gives them a lot more confidence to know what they're doing, because even experienced sewists, sometimes when you get to weird points like this, you think you know where you need to turn, you lift your needle, you pivot, and you realize you're a little further than a 1/4 inch. And so you have to put it down, go back again, which isn't a huge deal, but it can be a cause of stress for people who are new. So when I was teaching my niece, she really liked doing this when we did a project. So it takes, a minute or two to just draw those lines. And now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to sew all the way around with a 1/4 inch. And we're going to leave a few inches open on this straight side down towards the point, but not too close, because we want to be able to turn that nicely. So there and there. So now we're going to head to the sewing machine. Even though my machine will do a knot for me, whenever I am sewing at the beginning or at the end, when I know I'm going to be turning something right side out, I always go forward and backward just so that there's a little bit more stability to that section and it's not going to rip open when I'm turning my project. So now you'll see how easy that was, that I could just stop on that line, lift the foot, pivot or turn my fabric, and then I'm going to put the foot back down so that it is lined up with this edge, and we're going to keep on going. Now we're just going to remove these pins and we're going to trim and cut our corners. So I like to cut my corners nice and deep, especially these, because they are so tight. Getting all of this fabric inside this little section is going to make it really hard to turn that corner well. I will say though, that you're not going to get a perfect point, whatever you do. It's going to be a little bit bubbled, but that's okay because it's on the inside. So I clipped those points. And then I'm just going to cut right along where the white fabric is cut. So I'm going to cut that back off, or the lining. Then I'm going to cut those 2 corners. Now it's also important to trim here so that this is going to turn and give us a nice straight area on the envelope. So what I do is I take my scissors and I cut straight in to each of those pivot points. And then I just cut kind of at an angle on both sides, because that is going to ease up that fabric so that when we turn and press it, it's going to press really nicely. Then we're going to do the same thing up here. I do 2 cuts. Make sure you don't cut your stitching whenever you're cutting corner. So you'll see we had so many cuts to do with the corners that it was just as easy, actually easier and faster, to cut the rest of this lining off now instead of cutting it into the shape. So next we just need to turn this right side out, and you want to get it as right side out as possible with your fingers before you use a turning tool. So I always rub my finger along the seams, just kind of press that out as best I can. These bottom corners obviously are going to need a bit of help. I'm going to grab my turning tool. And again, if you don't have one, you can use the tip of a pen. Make sure the pen isn't open because you don't want to draw on your fabric. You could use a chopstick, something that has a point but isn't super pointy, because you don't want it to poke through, especially since we cut pretty close to those seams. Even if I really jabbed this hard, I could poke this through, which would be a bummer. We'd be starting over. Going to use my quilter's clapper. This is just a piece of wood, really easy to hold. It's unfinished. After you press this down. It takes the heat out of the fabric and also gives you a better crease than if you don't use one. I also love it because when you're steaming cotton, especially when you're on a smaller ironing board like this that is metal, this fabric gets really hot. So I like to do this not only for how well it helps press that, but it also makes it less hot for my fingers. Then here where we turned it, you just want to have that tucked under with the same seam allowance. So when we're done, nobody's going to know which side you turned. I'm going to use this for the outside, this for the inside. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this down and press that flat. Now you'll notice on the template, it has a line. So you can use that. You're just going to kind of put this up a little bit, like with the seam allowance, right? Because it's still a little bit wider. So you can do it this way. Put your ruler here, move that. You want it about a 1/2 inch down. And then you can fold that, move your ruler, do not iron on an acrylic ruler, and press. Or I was doing that on a different video and somebody told me about this cool product because we all learn about things at different times, right? So she told me about the Clover Hot Ruler and you can iron right on it. So what I do is I put this down and I make sure this line is even on the edges. This point is at that 1/2 inch. And then I can leave this here. I can press on there and do that. It's really cool. I like it for projects like this, but it's really, really handy for bigger projects where maybe you're doing a long strip of fabric and you need it folded down 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch. It's a fun little tool to have in your arsenal. So I just wanted to share that with you. Now we're going to unfold that and you can see that crease. We're just going to fold this up and put these points to the crease and press. So now we have our shape. And if you just wanted it to be plain and you didn't want a stamp or an address or anything on the back, you would be good to go to sew this together. But we're going to do the whole shebang. So I'm going to show you how to do the stamp and the address piece next. We'll use this as an example. So for the stamp, I cut a 1-inch piece out of fabric. And I usually try and have something that I like in the center. This was cut out of this bottom section, so this is going to work really well. I'm just going to take that and I'm going to fussy cut it, which basically means I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to line that sunflower up inside a 1-inch square. And it's a little bit bigger than 1 inch, so I can either cut some of the petals off on either side, or I could off-center it like that and be artsy. I'm just going to kind of make it the whole center. So I'm just going to turn it and cut all 4 sides, making sure I'm lining it up so that it's going to be about a 1-inch square when we're done. So this is going to be the center of my stamp. So if you have white, I would use a color instead of white for this outer stamp section. So just go into your scrap fabrics. I happen to have the same fabric, and you're going to want a piece that is, or at least a 1/4 inch larger than your stamp all the way around. I'm just going to cut this really quickly and make it an odd shape and show you how it really doesn't matter, because when we make it into a stamp, it's going to be perfect. So we're going to sew that onto that. But before we do that, we're going to get our dress section ready. And I'm going to use this yellow again. So I'll have this stamp. Oh, it's going to be interesting. I've never done this in color. So I like to make this 1 inch high and about 2.5 inches long. So this is 2 1/4. That's just what it is. So that's going to be totally fine. So that stamp will be up there. This will be here. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. You can do it with stitching, and I'm going to show you that. Or another way is to use heat transfer vinyl if you have a cutting machine. And that's how I did this. So you would basically take your Cricut, Scan and Cut, Silhouette, whatever you have. You could do a name. You could say for you, whatever you want to do. You would iron that onto that piece of fabric and then sew that onto the envelope. So that's an option, but I'm going to show you the sewing method. So because I want this to be jiggly lines, I actually don't want that on the inside of the envelope. So I am going to sew that before I put it onto the envelope. It's a little harder because this is just one piece of fabric. It's so flexible. So you could either starch that to make it a little bit stiffer, or I am just going to put a little scrap of interfacing on the back to give it a little bit of body and help it to hold its shape while we stitch. Okay, so now we are going to go to the sewing machine. Now I'm just going to quickly sew all 4 sides of this little sunflower stamp image to the gold backing. And I am using a smaller stitch length. I'm using a 1.9, and I'm going to not go all the way to the edge. And the reason I'm using a smaller stitch length is I want to be able to fray that edge because I think it just gives a little fun look to my stamp. So you want to try and be a little more equal distant from the edge. This one is a little bit higher than the rest, but we're just going to wing it. And then I'm just going to take tweezers and I'm just going to pull some of these threads out. And you can do it all the way around. Primitive little frayed look to it. And then it looks purposeful and not like a couple threads are coming out if you don't do it. See, it gives kind of a fun look. And then we'll cut the yellow in a minute. But first, we are going to just sew our address onto our label. And I usually just do 2. You always want to do a contrasting color fabric. If I did black, it would show up a lot more, but I'm just going to do white and see how that looks. And again, I'm using a small stitch length so that we can curve this a little bit more in this short distance. But before we sew these down, we need to trim our stamp. And I'm just going to do that right here so it's easy. So I keep little bowls by my sewing machine for threads. So I'm going to put that down so that I don't end up getting a bunch of little threads into my sewing machine since I've decided to do this right here. So I'm just going to take the pinking shears and I'm going to cut all 4 sides so that it really looks like a stamp and not just a square on a square. So there's our stamp. I do have links to all of the products below the video if there's anything that you decide, oh, I like that and I want that. So now I'm just going to place this stamp and I'm going to sew this on. Now, this time I am going to pull up the bobbin thread, which means I'm going to put the needle down while holding this thread, lift the needle, give a little tug, grab my tweezers. And I always use tweezers because if I use my fingers, I end up stabbing my finger a lot with that sharp needle. Put both threads under the foot and then I'm going to hold that as I start. That is going to avoid having one of those little bird nest knots created underneath your fabric. Now I'm going to place the address. So I'm just going to do the same thing, sew that on there. The next thing we need to do is draw the lines that we are going to sew to make it look like paper folded for an envelope. And you can do this a couple ways. You can use a pencil, you can use a heat erasable pen, you could even just put a little piece of tape as a guideline. I'm going to throw caution to the wind and I'm going to use one of these Frixion pens. They are supposedly not designed for fabric, even though they will go away with heat, but they might come back if the fabric gets too cold. I used them a lot for a while, then I learned that little fact. My Madame Sew dried up and I don't have a replacement, so we are going to throw caution to the wind because it's an envelope, for goodness sake. I don't think it's an heirloom thing that's going to be sticking around so long. So I have drawn the lines on those. Now, before I have always done colored outside. So I've always used white so that it shows up really nicely, like on this one. But because we're doing a white outside, I'm going to change my thread and I'm going to do gold because I want it to show up. So I'm just going to do a contrasting color to my fabric. Now I'm going to sew the paper lines. I'm going to raise the bobbin thread and grab a hold of that so there won't be a big knot underneath because that will be inside my envelope. Then you just want to trim off those threads. And now we're going to sew the envelope closed. If you do Velcro, you need to put the Velcro on before you sew the pocket together because it's really hard to sew that on when this is already together. But because Velcro is so flat, you can sew all the way around once the Velcro is on. So I'll just walk you through how you would do Velcro if that is your choice. Okay, so if we were going to do Velcro, you would sew the soft or hook and loop. You would sew the soft side on the inside of the flap. Then you would fold this up. You would put this down, fold it up like this to figure out exactly where the other side of the Velcro needs to go so that those two are going to match. Then you would open this back up and sew that on. That's if you're going to do Velcro. Then you would sew it all together. But I want to do a snap because they're super cute. So I am going to sew this together and then we're going to do the snap. I'm going to show you that that can work. And because this is folded, it's basically 4 layers of fabric when you get those seam allowances in there. You can see that my presser foot is really tilted. It's tilting up and flat on the back. To make it more even and move better when it gets started, I'm going to use leader fabrics. This is basically pieces of folded up fabric. Now just squeeze these fabrics back under and put the presser foot down. Now the presser foot is flat and the feet have more to grab onto to get started. It just makes for smoother sewing. You don't have to do it. It's just something I wanted to share with you. So I'm just going to sew all the way around about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And doing this sewing is not only going to be sewing the pocket, but it is also going to sew this area shut where we turned this right side out. To finish this envelope up, we're going to add a snap to close it. And as I've mentioned before, these are called cam snaps. They are plastic snaps. They come in all kinds of colors, made in the USA, family-owned business. I love them. Haven't met the people, but I love the product and I love that it's a US-based company. I have a lot of different colors which are the circles, just like this. So it's just a circle snap. They also make cute little hearts and stars, and I don't know if they have any other shapes, but for this one, I'm just going to do a dot because I don't know. I liked the heart on the pink for Valentine's Day, but we're going to do a circle on this one, and I chose to use the gold. So what you need are 2 of these pointy pieces, and then you need the female part is the innie, and the male part is the outie. You can think of it as a belly button. a 1/2 inch down from this point so that your snap is centered. But I want to show you how to really figure that out instead of just measuring, because sometimes maybe you stitched a little further from the edge. The main thing is you don't want this circle to be on this seam allowance where it's a little bit thicker. So you want to kind of feel in your fabric for how far up it needs to be so that it's going to be nice and flat and not tilted. So I'm going to say right there, which is a little bit more than that 1/2 inch. Not much, but a teeny bit. So I just put that there and then put the awl, which is like an ice pick for fabric. Be very careful, it just pokes a hole in there. Then you're going to put the circle side with the point through the fabric on the outside. You're going to just use your fingers and push down, make sure the fabric is down. And then you're going to take the female side, or the outie belly button side, and put that on top. Now you're going to grab the press to put these on. The circular part is going to sit right in the divot of this black area. And then the outie or innie is going to sit on this white plastic part. So you're going to get that in there. And then I always just kind of turn it and investigate and make sure it's centered in there before I squeeze. Now, when I squeeze, what is happening is this is flattening the plastic point inside this piece so that that piece is connected and going to stay on there. So that's great. We have the outside. Now, how do we decide where to put this one? It's very simple. You take the snap, you fold it down, and you press. See how that leaves a circular mark right there? Outie snap part leaves a mark. You're going to take the awl and you're going to poke a hole in the center of that circle, being really careful just to go a little bit in. Don't go through the front of your envelope. Make your hole. This time you're going to take the circle piece and you're going to go from the inside of the envelope, put it in there, press it down, put the other half on, and you're just going to repeat the process with this press to secure this half of the snap. And that is it. It's done. Look at how cute. So here are some examples. This one, I just did a stamp. I didn't do the address part. This one, I used my Cricut and used heat transfer vinyl. This one has a Velcro close and it has a sewn address, kind of like this one. And the stamp, you can definitely see that more because I used a darker thread than on this one. You just experiment as you go. And now these are ready to use.
Who's ready for the holidays, for hostess gifts? Who is ready for a glass of wine? I got my hair up. I am ready to work. Let's make some wine bags. In today's episode, I'm going to show you a simple way to make reversible wine bags so you can have either side out. No circles. We're going to do box bottoms. We're going to tie it with a bow, and it's going to fit either one of these size wine bottles. I love that they're reversible. You can pick 2 different fabrics. You want to make sure the fabrics coordinate because you will see that inside fabric a little bit when you have it wrapped around your wine bottle. These wine bottle bags are going to have a box bottom, so no circle cutting. It's going to be nice and simple. So let's get started. You're going to need 2 pieces of fabric, 12 inches wide, 16 inches high. If you're using a directional fabric, make sure you're paying attention and that you have the direction going on the 16 inch. And then when you go to sew it together, make sure you're paying attention to which side has the top of your pattern. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to fold this in half, and then you're going to clip or pin, and we're going to sew down one long side and across the bottom. Again, making sure you're paying attention if your fabric is directional, that you leave the top open, because nobody wants a wine bag where everything on the fabric is upside down. Now you're just going to press the seams open on the long end of both pieces of fabric. You don't need to go all the way down because we will be trimming off that point. And while you're at your ironing board, take it and fold down the top edge 1/2 inch. And this doesn't have to be super exact. You just want to make sure both halves are pretty consistent. And you're going to press that as well. This way we can get all of our ironing done at once. Now we're going to make our box bottoms. And I love using this 1.5 inch wide Cute Cuts ruler because that is exactly how far from the tip that we are going to mark our sewing line. But first we need to get it all lined up. Now I've made quite a few of these wine bags and I have created a system that makes it go quickly and evenly. So what you're going to do is you're going to line up this seam line on one of your grid lines of your cutting mat. So you have the seam line up here, and then you have the point where it seamed right there. So we have both of those on that 10-inch mark. Doesn't matter which mark, just put it on a mark. Then you're going to flatten the bottom. So see how it creates that square, and you're going to make sure that that stitch line is lining up here, the stitch line here, to that seam line there. And then also making sure that, that everything just stays straight on that line. Sometimes you need to adjust it because sometimes you'll put it down and it'll be like a little bit wider here and there. And so I have found this is the quickest and easiest way to get this done. And I am all about getting projects done quickly whenever possible. So now we're going to take our 1.5-inch ruler, or just whatever ruler you have, and you're going to measure 1.5 inches from the tip to where we're going to sew. And then I'm just going to mark this. I'm just using a regular pen because this is going to be totally inside, encapsulated, so you'll never see that pen mark again. Then I'm going to put a little pin in that. Cute little Riley Blake pin, I love it. Now I'm going to grab this without moving it. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to put that down because we already have that all lined up nicely. And we're going to mark from the other side. Now you're just going to repeat with the other half of your wine bag. Now we're just going to sew along all 4 of those lines. And this is definitely an area where you can daisy chain them, meaning you don't have to take them totally off, just sew one to the other. And if you're doing a lot of wine bags, this really does save you some time and thread. So are wine bags something you'd like to see more of? Would you like to see how to do them with a drawstring inside? A little bit more complicated? Leave me a note in the comments and let me know if that's something that's of interest. Now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to trim 1/4 inch from that line. You can use your rotary cutter, but I'm just going to do this with scissors so I don't have to keep moving my cameras all over my room. Now the next step is to get these wrong sides together. So you're going to take one and turn it right side out. It does not matter at all which one because these wine bags will be reversible. So you don't have to make any decisions yet about which side you want out. Then we're going to put one bag inside the other and we're going to match these seams. You don't really have to worry too much down here. The main thing is to get these seams matched at the top. So the seam line and the fold, and then I'm just going to put a little clip there, and then we're just lining up this top edge. Because this is reversible, and because whoever wants a snarl of a knot in their thread, I'm going to be pulling up my bobbin thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my foot down, put my needle down, holding this thread, the top thread, and then I'm going to pick the needle up, and I'm going to give it a little tug, and I'm going to grab that bobbin thread. So now I'm holding on to both the top and the bobbin, and I'm going to put it under that foot, and I'm going to hold on to that, and I'm going to do a little knot. Now we're going to stitch all the way around, and I usually hold on to that thread until I've taken maybe 2 stitches just to make sure it doesn't get sucked back down under by some gremlin in the sewing machine. And now I'm just going to top stitch all the way around. And now that your wine bag is done, you just have to decide which side you want to be on the outside. So let's just flip this, put the red on the outside. I think that's just going to be beautiful for fall, for a fall hostess gift, for Thanksgiving. Put that wine in there, and then I just cut a piece of 1-inch ribbon. You can use anything. I'm just going to tie it right there. And now it is ready to go. If your lip balm knows how to hide in your purse, as well as a dog that doesn't want to go to the vet, then you need to watch this tutorial and learn how easy it is to make a cute lip balm holder. These are so convenient, and when you use the Key Fob hardware, you can attach your key to it too. You can hook it in your purse, hook it onto your water bottle, anything with a hook. But before we get started, my name is Tara Reed. I am an artist and fabric designer with Riley Blake Designs. Be sure to click subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure you click that little bell so YouTube knows that you want to know when I post new videos, which is about weekly. So let's dive into this and get our lip balm under control. Let's dive into how easy it is to make a lip balm holder with fabric interfacing and a 1-inch key fob. What you're going to need to start is a 15-inch by 2¼ inch strip of fabric and also the same size fusible interfacing. And I am using the 911 fusible featherweight interfacing from Pellon. Then a pen or a heat resistant pen. You can use a regular one if you need to. Your Key Fob hardware. I highly recommend getting the pliers. It makes it much easier, but if you need to, you can use a hammer to close that if you don't want to invest in this. But Key Fob holders are one of my favorite things, so I recommend you invest in it. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the interfacing on the wrong side of our fabric. And the interfacing, you know which side is which, because one side you can see, I don't know if you can see the little bumps. That is the part that fuses or melts to your fabric. So that part needs to be down, and then it's smooth on the other side. If you do it backwards, you're going to put a bunch of glue gunk on your iron. Not the best. So you're going to put it down like this and line those up. And then, because every once in a while you make a mistake and you do it backwards, right? Tell me I'm not the only one. You can also use a pressing cloth, which you can buy these that are specifically pressing cloths. It's just a thin piece of cotton. I like it because you can see through it often. And you can put that over top. So if for some reason some of the fusible material gets between the fabric and your iron, it's going to go onto this pressing cloth and not onto your iron. So I'm going to get that done and then show you what to do next. Now I have the interfacing ironed onto the back side of the fabric, and that's just going to give us a little bit more stability with our fabric and our little holder when we're done. Now we're going to fold it in half and match these ends. Fold that down and either put a pin in it to make sure this part doesn't slide while we do the next part, or I sometimes just do a clip at the bottom, just depending on what I have. We're going to line this up. So see, each of these thicker lines, that's 1 inch. So we want to center this fabric on a 1 inch increment. And because we did 2¼ it's going to be just shy of each of these little dotted lines. Okay, so there's our 1 inch. Now I'm going to make a mark 1/4 inch to each side of that 1 inch because we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. What we're trying to do right now is to figure out the angle to cut this so that the tip is the same width as your 1 inch Key Fob hardware. We could leave it out and it could just go like that, but I just think it looks more finished this way and it doesn't take a lot more work. So we make a mark and then about 3/4 of an inch down on each side. Then you're just going to draw a little line, make sure it stays together, and you're just going to cut. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to sew down each of the angle and each of the long sides. Leave this end open for turning using a 1/4 inch seam. Now we're going to turn this right side out and we're going to use this cute little flamingo turning tool to make sure the angle there and the points are out. All right, now I got it most of the way out. Now I'm just going to gently run this along that seam at the top. So we get that 1 inch part out. And I just kind of roll the seams to make sure it's all out nicely. Flatten it as much as I can with my fingers. Then we're just going to iron that flat. Now I'm just going to take it back to the sewing machine and either do a quick zigzag, or you can just do a straight stitch right close to that. It's going to be inside. So this part right here is going to be deep in here. So if you want to just do a straight stitch, you can. And that's what I'm going to do, and I'll be right back. So I just did a straight stitch there because it's going to stop that from fraying. It's going to be inside, and I did not feel like changing my presser foot. Now, this part is really important if you have directional fabric, which I do. You can tell more from a bigger piece. See, most of the fruit looks good this way, and it looks upside down this way. So you want to make sure it doesn't look upside down when you're done your holder. You want these grapes going the direction that it hangs, if that's what ends up on here. So you're going to do it like this and look. These are backwards, so we're going to turn it over this way. So this is going to be the front. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fold this up 1 inch. Just use this handy dandy little ruler. Fold that up 1 inch. Press that
So we're sewing a 1/4 inch from this folded edge, but I'm going to turn it over because the underside when you do the knot and everything sometimes looks a little bit worse. So we're going to make sure this looks really good from the top because this will be the side that we see. And then we're going to turn it back so that the raw edge is up, and this is going to be the front because the fruit is right side up. Now we're going to turn it up about 2.5 inches. But before I sew that, I always check, grab your favorite lip balm, shout out to Burt's Bees. So I always check to make sure that when it goes in, it's going to stick out a little bit so that it's easy to grab in and out of this holder. I'm just going to clip both sides. Now, one thing to be careful of is sometimes this raw edge like sticks out on the corner. So just make sure you tuck that in as you sew around. I am using a Janome sewing machine with a 1/4 inch walking foot, and I find it works a lot better than the traditional foot, even if it's a walking foot, because this 1/4 inch has like one walker that's right in the center, whereas the other one has it on both sides and it only grabs one side of the fabric when you're sewing really close. So if you have that option, make sure you use it. Now we're just going to sew all around here about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And you're going to double back where this meets just so it's more secure because that's going to be the area that gets the most use, putting your lip balm in and out. I don't know if you can see this. I'm seeing a little bit of that edge, so I'm just going to tuck that under with my scissors before I sew over that. All that's left is to go add the key fob. The last step is to attach our hardware, which is basically a piece of metal, and it's got these little, I don't know, triangles that are going to dig into and attach to the fabric to keep that nice and secure. And it comes with a key ring. And there's a link below the video to find them on Amazon if you are on my YouTube channel or my website. So it's going to line up like that. So you can either do it like that and put it in to the pliers. I highly recommend the pliers. If you don't have any, what you're going to do is you're going to line this up, put a little piece of fabric over there and gently hammer it. Put fabric on there so that you don't dent or scratch the metal, and so it'll still look good. But I love key fobs, definitely worth the pliers. And this is what I've learned over the years of doing key fobs. The easiest way to do it is to set your hardware in your key fob first, and then gently close it so it'll hold, right? So it holds there. Then take whatever you're putting into it and put it in and double check on both sides to make sure it's lined up with the top so it looks nice and professional. And then you simply squeeze. And that's it. It is done. It is ready for your lip balm.
Let's make a personalized key fob by sewing a key fob and adding names with your Cricut and heat transfer vinyl. So you need the name with the heat transfer vinyl, some type of a ribbon, or this is kind of a fabric ribbon to put the name on. 11 by 3.5 inch wide fabric, 11 by 2 inch wide fusible fleece. Going to need an iron, key fob tool, key fob hardware, weeding tool, and the little Cricut Mini. Now we're going to prepare the personalized parts where we're going to put the names. And I just got a couple yards of this, which is going to help me do tons and tons of these. I've weeded these two, but I'm using just a heat transfer vinyl. So you're just going to peel off all of the vinyl that isn't part of the name. I love heat transfer because it is just so easy to pull off. Make sure, and these are pretty small because this ribbon is only 1/2 inch wide, so these names are pretty tiny, but make sure you get all the pieces like the centers of the letters. I always turn it over and put it down to make sure that I've gotten the center of those letters. Then we are just going to press this onto this fabric, leaving, some space between each name so that we can cut them apart to make them separate little tags. Here's an example of how I did it on a grosgrain ribbon. So you want a little bit on each side for when you sew that onto the key fob. You're going to check your heat press for the settings, the heat setting and time for pressing these. I'm using my Cricut Mini on medium. So that's the 2 dots. And then I'm just going to hold down for about 25 seconds on each one. Let that cool. You're just going to peel that plastic off. That's pretty quick and simple, isn't it? And now we're just going to cut. And these will be ready to sew onto the key fobs before we add the hardware. Now, if you don't want the edges to fray, like if you sew it, it might fray a little bit down to the stitch line. If you're okay with that, you're good to go. If you don't want it to fray, you can put a little bit of clear nail polish or fray check on those edges. You're going to place the fabric face down and then center your fleece with the fusible side down on the fabric. Follow the manufacturer's instructions, grab an iron, and quickly just fuse that to the fabric. Then you're going to fold the fabric just right along the edge of the fleece on both sides. Then you're going to fold it in half. So we're getting all those raw edges tucked inside. Excuse my steam, and press that again. Now this we're going to take over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch, 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 and get that ready. Now we're going to take our pressed and folded key fob. We're going to sew down one edge, up the other, and then down the middle. Now you're going to fold this in half to place the name, because the key fob will go here, and that's the wristlet or key fob part. And also just double check both sides to see which side you want to be on the outside. Sometimes one side has more of the pretty part of the design than the other. So I'm going to have this side out because I think it's prettier. And now I'm going to take this label for Jillian and I'm going to put it right in the middle. And I'm going to just stitch all the way around that. Okay, so the tag's on. Now you're going to sew the ends together before we add the key fob hardware, just so it stays together nicely. Now if you're going to put a tag, like I like to put my logo inside my key fobs, you're going to put that in the center now. Have it about 1/8 of an inch from the edge because you want to make sure the key fob covers that and you want to make sure you get that sewn in there. That's totally optional. You do not need to put anything in there if you don't want to. So I go back and forth a few times just to make this area strong. So now it is ready for the hardware. We're almost done. Now we just need to add the hardware. So you put your fabric in the end clip and it's perfectly sized. These are 1-inch key fobs. And then you get it into the hardware and you just press down to cinch that area and keep this circle out of there so that this will tighten nicely. Give it a couple squeezes and it's done. These are so easy. They're great for like a bridesmaid gift. You could do a year, like if you have a friend or a family member who loves seasonal things. They could be great things to sew and sell. Use them as a slumber party or, you know, a gift favor, maybe for teens or tweens. Use it for a fundraiser. They really do sew up quickly, especially if you just do a bunch at a time. Cut all the fabric, press it all, sew it all, put on all of these key fobs. So that is how easy it is to do. You can do them plain like this. You can add names. You could also add names with an embroidery machine. So many different ways to go.
In today's tutorial, I am going to show you how easy it is to make fabric trays with snaps. So when you store them, they store flat. This will take up barely any space at all, so you can make them for all the fun occasions. Make them for the holidays, make them just because, make them for your friends, make them for teachers. Super, super simple, beginner-friendly project. I demonstrate how to use this big size, which is perfect for rolls or bread at a dinner party. Use them at picnics, things like that. But I am going to show you how to fussy cut, how to take a print, decide exactly what you want in the center, and leave nothing to chance. Otherwise, this is all straight stitching, a little bit of ironing, so easy. Who wants to get started on these amazing fabric baskets or trays? Let's start by talking about supplies. Here is everything we're going to need, except for the ironing board and sewing machine, to make these cute little fabric baskets. So I'm going to be using fabric clips. You can also use pins. Of course, rotary cutter, we need 2 pieces of fabric. I'm going to be using cam snaps. I'm going to show you how to use washi tape to create guidelines that are going to be really helpful to make this quick and easy. A turning tool. And then if you sign up for my newsletter, you can get this for free with this chart and these very handy templates. So what I did was I cut them out and I laminated them, and then I can just use them over and over again. You basically take the awl that comes with your cam snap set, push it through the circles that are marked for where to place those snaps on these baskets. So I'll show you how those work. And again, you can sign up for my newsletter and get that. There'll be a link below this video to do that. I also have the full pattern with lots of pictures and written description in my Etsy shop, so I will give you that link as well. So for each fabric basket, you need 2 pieces of fabric, and I show you how to do 3 sizes, either using a 15-inch square, 12-inch square, or 8-inch square. And I'm going to be demoing the 15-inch square. So I have a 15-inch square. This is what I'm going to use for the outside of my basket. Then I have a 15-inch square, or slightly under 15-inch square, of fusible fleece. I usually use the Pellon 987F. And then I have a big piece of my main print from my Better to Wake at the Lake collection, and I'm going to show you how to fussy cut this so you have exactly what you want in the center of your basket. So like this is the small one. So I'm going to show you how to put exactly what you want in the bottom part once it's snapped together by fussy cutting this piece of fabric. You can use a regular ruler, but what I'm going to use is this nice big 16.5-inch square from Creative Grids. It just makes this process faster and easier. You can use a regular ruler and the measurements on your mat if you don't have this, but sometimes it's fun to see how different tools work and how they make your life faster. Okay, first we need to decide exactly what we want on the inside of our basket and what portion of this fabric we want in the center. I'm going to look at this chart. So we're going to cut a 15-inch square. The inside square is going to measure 9.5 inches. So you need to be paying attention to both of those numbers as we work with this ruler. So one thing that's cool about this ruler is it has, in the white circles, it has inches, 10, 9, 8, 7. In the black circles, it marks the ½ inch. So if you were cutting a square that was 15.5 inches, you would work off of these 2 sides, but I'm going to work off of these because we're cutting a 15-inch square. I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape and I'm going to put it right along that 15-inch mark on both directions, because then we're going to see exactly what we're cutting and we won't be distracted or confused by that extra 1.5 inches. Okay, so now this is going to be our square. We just disregard everything past the painter's tape. Now, you could also do that for the height of the side. So the sides are going to be 2.5 inches. Let's try it. This would be good to do if you were going to make a bunch of these, but it's a lot of tape if you're just making one. So anyway, if we want to mark this, we would do it 2.5 inches from that tape on all 4 sides. So this is going to be, well, I'm going to put it on the inside. Let's see. I don't want to block what we're looking at. So I'm putting this to this side of the 2.5 inch mark. And I like using this tape because it doesn't have a lot of adhesive on it, so it is not going to leave any residue on my ruler. And I'm also going to show you how to use it on the sewing machine when we are sewing these lines. And we don't even have to go all the way over because we're basically just taping out this center section, which is what we're going to be fussy cutting. Okay, so how cool is that? We now see the full size that we're going to cut, and now we can see what is going to be in the center. And when I say in the center, that means everything that's inside this yellow or orange, whatever you want to call that square, is what is going to show on the bottom of your basket or tray when you snap it together. So you can decide what part you want. You love this saying the best days. The best days include sunshine and lake water. Then you can put that right in the center. And then you can also see what else you're going to get. So let's just take a look at some other options that we have on this piece. And I purposefully cut this larger than 15 inches so that I would have some leeway. I move this like this. I'm going to have the whole bass, this saying, the go jump in a lake, all these things. There's not a lot that's going to be cut off, but it will be on the sides. So remember, everything you're seeing here is going to fold up the sides. So it's not like we're cutting all this off, it's just going to fold up. So this is what I've decided I want. Now, because this is so big, I couldn't put it on a rotary mat, but I'm making sure that everything is on my cutting mat. And I'm gonna start by just getting this whole thing smaller. I know this is not the edge that we're going to be using, but I need to get started. So that just helped me get this piece out of my way because it's a lot to spin around. Now we need to cut these two sides, and then we're gonna turn it 180 degrees to get the 15-inch square. We're gonna line up the sides that we just cut with the painter's tape. Or if this is the only one you're going to do, you can take that off and line it up with the actual 15-inch line. But I'm just double checking that that's correct. And I'm gonna keep this tape on here so I can whip up a few more for holiday gifts. So again, I'm just going to turn, keep this flat, and I'm going to cut these sides off. Very cool tool. I love how we can tape that up, make it nice and easy. So doing this fussy cutting is the most complicated and slightly time-consuming way to make these baskets, but I wanted to show you how it worked because you're going to be able to easily figure out how to do it with just two pieces of fabric where you really do not have to worry about how you cut it. I just cut these fish and I cut this design. They're both random patterns, so where you cut doesn't matter. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to my ironing board and I'm going to fuse the fleece to the back side of the outer fabric. You can do it to either fabric, the inner or the outer, because we are going to quilt this a little bit to make sure that it stays really well. I'm going to go fuse this following the manufacturer's instructions, and I will be right back. Now this piece of fusible fleece is well secured to the wrong side of my outer fabric. I'm going to grab my clips. I'm going to put my fabrics right side together. Just line those up. And now I am going to clip. You can also pin because we are just going to sew all the way around the outside of this 1/4 inch from the edge. We're going to leave 3 to 4 inches open on one of the sides so that we can turn this right side out once we get it sewn together. So super easy. One thing I often like to do is I'll use an opposite color so that I know to stop because I'm going to start about here. And then if I just get on a roll and all of a sudden I'll see red, I'll be like, oh, time to stop so that we have room to turn this right side out. So I'm just going to sew around 1/4 inch from the edge. I am using a 1/4 inch foot so I can just line that edge up right with the edge of my foot. Now my foot also has these little lines on it, tells me where the 1/4 inch is. So I line that up as close as possible to the edge, maybe one more stitch, leave my needle down, lift my presser foot and pivot. And sometimes it's a little too far or not quite far enough, but you do it as close as possible and then keep going. And these baskets are so handy. Some people call them a tray. I usually call it a basket because I use them a lot for rolls and bread on the table. They don't have high sides, but they're great for little dinner rolls, for Thanksgiving, for picnics, things like that. So many ways to use them. This could be a quick and easy gift for the holidays to thank someone. Let me know in the comments how you plan on using these. Are you going to use them for yourself? Are you going to sew and sell? Or are you going to give them as gifts? I'd love to know. And now that we're getting to the red one, I know that I am close to where I began and I need to leave some space to turn it. So I'm just going to go pretty much to there and then back and forth again. Before we turn this right side out, we want to trim each of the corners to get rid of any bulk so that we can get as nice of a point as possible when we turn this right side out. Traditionally, when people trim corners, they usually just go straight across with one cut, making sure you do not hit your stitch line. So you get that angle like that. But you'll see when you turn this right side out, you have all of this fabric that is going to be on the inside and it can get a little bit bulky. So I'll show you with a fresh corner, my preferred way. I like to do 2 cuts that goes down a little bit further to get rid of more of this fabric here. But again, making sure you don't get that corner. So I'm going to do one like this. And then I'm going to do the other like that. So you'll see it's a bit more fabric that has come off of this corner. So here's a comparison. This is the straight across, and this is this corner. So this is going to fold and give us a much better point. So I'm just going to fix this one to my preferred way, but I wanted to show you the difference. And I'm going to do that to all 4 corners. Now I'm going to turn this right side out. This is so big, it's nice and easy. You can get your whole hand in there. And just run your fingers along the sides, along all the edges, and use your finger to get that point out as much as you can to start. And then I will show you how to very gently use a turning tool to make even better corners. You'll see that's pretty rounded if you're just using your finger. But if I use this Riley Blake turning tool, and there's lots of different kinds, you can even use a chopstick. So I'm going to put it in here, and I'm going to very slowly and gently push along both sides. So I'm pushing this way and this way to get that corner out as much as I can. If you do it hard, especially because we trimmed, there is definitely a chance that you could see this blue tip come through the fabric, which is absolutely not what we want. We do not want to break the fabric or the stitching on any of these corners. So just patience wins the game on this. Nice and slow, and do this for all 4 corners. And you'll see it bows a little bit because one side has the fusible fleece, so it's a little bit thicker than the other side. And we're going to fix that at the ironing board. We're going to make sure these edges are even and these corners are even, and you're going to press that flat. Also, make sure you fold the open turned edge under so that you get a nice straight line across here. So because I know you know how to iron, I'm just going to go whip that up and I will be right back. Now I'm back from the ironing board, and you can see I got that nice and flat, and I made sure that that seam line is right on the edge so you're not seeing any of the back fabric on the front or the front fabric on the back. And where I had left it open to turn, I have that pressed under so it is ready to go. Because all of the sewing from now on is going to show on both the front and the back, I am going to do my little pull up the bobbin trick. But hold on to the top thread, put your presser foot down, put your needle down, keep holding that thread, lift your needle, give that thread a little yank, and then I grab tweezers and I just pull that bobbin thread. So now I am holding both threads. I'm going to pull them back. If your machine will do an automatic knot, you can do that. If not, just hold that. So about 2 or 3 stitches forward and then 2 or 3 stitches back, and that will lock your threads, and you will never get one of those nasty bird's nests that happens if you don't hold that bobbin thread up. And now we're just going to sew all the way around about 1/8 of an inch from the edge so that we are closing this opening that we had for turning and just giving a nice finish to the edge. I always cut the beginning threads off before I get back to that spot so that they don't get tangled in the end threads when I go to finish this sewing. Let's talk a little bit about thread choice really quickly. So for this one, because I used a navy background on this main print and navy on the back, I used both a navy top thread and bobbin thread. But on these, I used different. So I used navy on the side that would be navy and a lighter blue here, just so that the stitching would all be really subtle. And on this one, I used this green for this side, so you don't really see it, and brown for this side. If I had used matching bobbin and top thread, you would either really see that seafoam green on this side or really see the brown stitching on this side. That is a choice you can make if you want the stitching to be part of your creativity. I just like it to blend. So now we have this all edge stitched, and the next thing we need to do is go back to our chart, and we're doing large, the 15-inch square, and the sides are each 2.5 inches high. So we are going to need to sew 2.5 inches from each edge all the way across. So it will intersect and create a little square in each corner. So there's 2 ways to do that. We can either draw lines on our fabric and sew along them, or we can set up guidelines, and you can use the seam guides on your sewing machine to make sure you are 2.5 inches. I'm going to show you how to do both. So you basically need a ruler that is longer than the 15 inches. So I grabbed my 24-inch ruler, and then you can either just take a piece of Taylor's chalk and draw that line, or you can use this little Choco marker, which is another way to get chalk. So I'm just going to place this 2.5 inches from the edge, and I'm going to draw a light line. If this was a lighter fabric, I might use a heat erasable pen. So I'm going to draw that on 2 sides. And then when we get to the sewing machine, I'm going to show you how we can do this by just setting up seam guides and not having to draw on the fabric. And again, kind of like we taped the ruler to fussy cut this. If you're doing a bunch of them to sew and sell or for holiday gifts or for yourself, I would recommend using the guidelines on your sewing machine so you don't have to draw 4 lines on every single one of these that you make. But I like to show you options and different ways to do things. So back to the sewing machine. Now, because we're doing the large one and you need to have your stitch line 2.5 inches in from the needle, that's a little bit longer than what is marked on here. So my guides go to about 2.25 inches. So we're going to need to do a little bit of work on our own. So I am going to take this ruler, I'm going to use a hand wheel, and I'm just going to put the needle almost all the way down. I'm going to make sure it is lined up with the 2.5 inch mark on the ruler. So now you can see this is the guideline that we need to set up. So washi tape to the rescue. You could also use painter's tape here. I'm just going to line that up so that it's right along the edge of the ruler. And then I can make sure it's straight because I can see that it's even with my metal plate. And I'm going to bring it down my sewing machine a bit, just so I have a longer guide to work with. This is going to be super easy to use if I am making a bunch of these. So now we are going to be sewing 4 lines, and I always try and start and do the knot or the forward and back from the edge stitching, not over the edge. And now I'm just going to use this guideline and go all the way to the other side. Now on this side, we have the chalk line, so I don't even have to worry, but the chalk line should keep me right along that edge as well. And what these stitch lines are doing is creating where the tray is going to fold. Now you can leave it just like this with just these pieces that are going to fold up to create the sides. But especially on the bigger ones, I feel like doing a little bit of quilting, even if you're just going this corner to this corner and doing an X, gives this more stability because you can take these and throw them in the laundry, use them over and over. So you wanna make sure that things aren't gonna get wrinkled and they're not going to separate from that fusible fleece. So a little bit of quilting is a good idea. This one, I could also, kind of do some machine quilting and go around the fish and everything, but we're just keeping it simple. So I am just going to go from corner to corner. Before you put your snaps in, you have to decide which is the outside because these buttons go on the outside. The male and female parts go on the inside. Now we know that we want this to be the inside of our tray because we fussy cut this very specifically to be the inside. But for a moment, let's pretend we don't know. We don't know if we want this to be the inside or if we want this to be the inside. So the way to figure that out is to just fold and clip this together so you can see it in both directions. See that? And that's going to be the outside. That's pretty cute. But maybe you want it to be this way and you would just do the same thing in this direction. For this one, we very specifically knew which was going to be the inside versus the outside. So that's what it would look like if that was the outside. This is too big of a print to be on the outside. But I can show you how it could make a difference. This one could have gone either way. I made it so the fish were on the inside and this print was on the outside. But I could have just as easily have done it this way, right? Where this is on the inside and the fish are on the. So if you got the templates, this makes it easy. I'll show you how to do it without them as well. I cut these out and I laminated them. There's one for each size of the tray. We are doing a large, and you will notice it shows you the corner. So you basically just line that up with the corner like that. And then you know exactly where to poke your holes. We're going to be using the awl, what I like to call a ice pick for fabric, and we're going to push straight through there to make the hole in the perfect spot on our corner. You're going to do that both sides. Be really careful. Do not poke your finger because this is very sharp. So that is super, super easy. Now, if you don't have the templates because you do not want me to have your email address or because you did not buy the pattern, I'm going to show you how to do it without. So you would place the snap heads down in these 2 corners, and you want to make sure they're not too close to the edge because you don't want them going through the seam allowance, and you want to make sure they're not going over that stitch line because this needs to fold. And so you can just kind of press that down, take a pen and mark that. And then you can take a ruler and figure out where you place that. So I basically did a 1/2 inch and 5/8 of an inch from that stitch line. So if I put this on the stitch line, 5/8 of an inch, and I mark 1/2 inch, that is where I'm going to put my holes on that side. So you can do the ruler method, or you can get this template for free by signing up for my email list, or you can purchase the full tutorial with pictures that show you all the steps to do this in my Etsy shop. And both of those links will be below this video. Now I'm going to show you how you put these snaps on using the tool. So you take this backing, or button I call it, and you push it through the hole that you made. And then you push the fabric down so that that point is really sticking out. You need to make sure that point is out as much as it can, because when you put the male or female part on there and then use this tool to squeeze, what it does, it basically mushes that point so that it holds the two pieces together. So you can see here, you can still see the point. And then this is slightly curved and it rests in the black part. And then this pushes down on the other side. So you're going to hold it like that, hold these two pieces together. You're going to get the button part sitting inside that black. This should be totally over the male or the female piece. You shouldn't be able to see it. And then you're just going to squeeze. And now you can see that that point is now flattened inside there. So you're just going to do the same thing 8 times, but make sure you have one male and one female in each corner. And it is done. So this is how it stores. So easy, does not take up a lot of space, just a piece of fabric. And then when you want to use it, you simply snap these corners together. And then if you don't like it bowed out like that, just kind of fold those in on that stitch line and finger press that, and it's going to give it a better shape. But look how cute that is. So this is the large. And the large is a 9.5 inch square bottom with 2.5 inch sides. This is the medium with a 7.5 inch square bottom and 2 inch sides. And then this is the small with a 5.5 inch bottom and a 1 inch side. So what do you think? Did you like any of these ideas in this video? If so, leave me a comment and let me know which one you're gonna make for your mom.